The steering wheel felt familiar under Hubert's calloused palms, worn smooth from 18 years of driving Madison's streets. He adjusted the rearview mirror for the 100th time that morning, a habit that had become unconscious ritual, and watched the early April drizzle speckle his windshield. The cab's interior smelled of old coffee, synthetic air freshener that never quite masked the odor of thousands of passengers, and the faint tang of the electrical tape he'd used to patch a tear in the backseat upholstery. His first fare of the day had been a bleary-eyed graduate student heading to UW-Madison's engineering campus, mumbling about a thesis deadline. Standard Wednesday morning run. Hubert had learned the city's rhythms the way a musician learns scales. He knew which lights changed slow, which intersections flooded in spring rain, where construction would snarl traffic before the orange cones appeared. He knew the shortcuts through residential streets that tourists never found, the loading zones where he could idle for 3 minutes without getting ticketed, the curve of University Avenue where frost persisted longest in winter. These were the technical skills of his trade, accumulated through nearly 2 decades behind the wheel, through divorces and custody arrangements, through economic downturns and surges, through the slow transformation of Madison from a mid-sized college town into something denser and more complex. The radio dispatcher's voice crackled through the speaker mounted on his dashboard. Unit 7, pick up at the Edgewater Hotel, guest heading to Dane County Airport. Hubert pressed the transmit button. Unit 7, copy, en route. His voice carried the flattened vowels of someone who'd grown up in rural Wisconsin, in a town small enough that everyone knew everyone, before he'd moved to Madison for work that actually paid. The windshield wipers scraped across glass in their rhythmic sweep, and he guided the Crown Victoria, a vehicle he'd bought used from the cab company and maintained himself because he trusted his own work more than any mechanic, toward the Edgewater. The hotel sat on Madison's North Shore, all glass and modern angles, rebuilt years ago from something older and shabbier. Hubert pulled into the circular drive and spotted his fare immediately. A woman in a business suit, mid-40s, pulling a roller bag with one hand while checking her phone with the other. She climbed into the back seat with practiced efficiency, barely looking at him. "Airport," she said, still focused on her screen. "Yes, ma'am." Hubert merged back onto Gorham Street, heading east. "Which airline?" "Southwest." She typed something rapidly. "Jesus, have you seen the news?" "Been driving since 6. What's going on?" She looked up, frowning. "They're saying there was some kind of incident at UW, a lab or something. It's all over social media, but nothing official yet." Hubert felt a small tightness in his chest, the instinctive worry of a parent, even though his kids were in school in Middleton, miles from campus. What kind of incident? People are calling it a terrorist attack. Chemical leak, maybe? I don't know. The university isn't saying anything, but students are posting videos of emergency vehicles everywhere. She went back to her phone, scrolling. "I'm just glad I'm getting out of town." They drove in silence past the familiar landmarks. Hubert's mind wandered to his children. Tommy, 9 years old and obsessed with building things from cardboard and duct tape, and Rachel, 12, who'd recently decided she wanted to be a veterinarian and filled notebooks with detailed sketches of animal anatomy. They lived with their mother in Middleton, in the house Hubert had helped buy back when the marriage was solid, before the long nights driving had worn them both down, before she'd met someone with regular hours and a desk job. Hubert saw the kids every other weekend and Wednesday evenings when he wasn't working, a schedule carved out by lawyers and mediators, as rigid as the city's street grid. He dropped the businesswoman at the airport terminal, watched her disappear into the building with her rolling suitcase, then checked his phone. A text from his dispatcher. "Multiple cancellations. Everyone's spooked. Stay available." Hubert replied with a thumbs-up emoji. His daughter had taught him that last month, laughing at how long it took him to find the right icon, and headed back toward downtown. The radio news station was mid-report when he tuned in. Authorities are still refusing to confirm details about the situation at the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus. Multiple sources report a large emergency response near the biochemistry building. The university has issued a shelter-in-place order for students and staff. Madison police are asking residents to avoid the campus area. Hubert's phone buzzed. Another text from dispatch. Unit 7, cancel next pickup. Customer no-show. He pulled over on East Washington Avenue, rain drumming harder now against the roof, and scrolled through local news on his phone. Social media was exploding with shaky footage. Police cars and fire trucks surrounding university buildings. People in hazmat suits. Students running. One video, posted 12 minutes ago, showed what looked like someone collapsed outside the chemistry building while others backed away, some screaming. The caption read, "What the fuck is happening? They won't let anyone near him." The comments beneath were chaotic, full of speculation. Terrorist attack? Gas leak? Anthrax? Someone claimed to have heard gunshots. Someone else said their roommate was trapped in a classroom, texting about a lockdown. The timestamp on most posts was within the last hour. Hubert felt the tightness in his chest expand. He called his ex-wife. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Hey, it's me. Just checking in. There's something going on at UW, some kind of emergency. Probably nothing, but I wanted to make sure you and the kids are okay. Call me back." He sat there, engine idling, watching rain streak the windows. The city around him continued its usual rhythms. Buses hissing to stops, pedestrians hurrying under umbrellas, a garbage truck grinding through its rounds. Normal. Everything looked normal. But Hubert had driven these streets long enough to sense when something was off, the way a sailor reads the sky before a storm. There was a quality to the radio chatter from other cabs, an edge to the dispatcher's voice, a subtle wrongness in the pattern of traffic. His phone rang. Dispatch. "Unit 7, I've got a priority pickup for you. Medical center, someone needs transport to a pharmacy on the west side. They're paying double rate." "Copy that, on my way." The university hospital complex sprawled across the western edge of campus, a maze of interconnected buildings that had grown organically over decades. Hubert had driven countless patients and staff to and from these facilities, knew which entrances to use, where the loading zones were, which elevators went to which wings. He pulled up to the main entrance and texted the pickup number. A man emerged 5 minutes later, middle-aged, wearing scrubs under a rain-slicked jacket. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, and climbed into the back seat heavily. "West Transfer Point Pharmacy," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Please hurry." Hubert glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Long shift?" 36 hours. The man rubbed his face. "And it's about to get longer. Heard there's some kind of situation on campus." The man looked out the window, jaw tight. "Yeah, there's a situation." Hubert waited, but the passenger didn't elaborate. They drove west on University Avenue, past the student apartments and coffee shops and bookstores that defined this part of Madison. The rain was letting up slightly, but the sky remained a solid gray mass, pressing down on the city like a weight. "Is it serious?" Hubert asked finally. "The thing on campus?" The man met his eyes in the rearview mirror. "I'm not supposed to talk about it. But, yeah, it's serious. We've got patients coming in with symptoms we can't explain. High fever, aggression, altered mental status, and it's spreading fast." He paused. "If you've got family, you might want to check on them." The tightness in Hubert's chest became something sharper. "What kind of symptoms?" "I've already said too much." The man looked away again. "Just be careful, that's all I can say." They reached the pharmacy, a small, independent place tucked into a strip mall. The man paid in cash, added an extra $20 bill. "Thanks for the ride. And seriously, Check on your family." Hubert sat in the parking lot after the passenger left, staring at his phone. He called his ex-wife again. Voicemail. He called his daughter's phone. She'd gotten it for her birthday last month, a point of contention between him and his ex, who thought 12 was too young, but Hubert had argued it was for safety, for exactly this kind of situation. The phone rang 6 times, then went to voicemail. "Rachel, honey, it's Dad. Just checking in. Call me when you get this, okay? Love you." He tried Tommy's school next, the elementary school in Middleton. The line was busy. He tried again. Still busy. The radio news station cycled through its report again. The university continues to decline comment on the nature of the emergency. However, sources within the Madison Fire Department confirm that hazmat teams have been deployed to multiple locations on campus. The Wisconsin National Guard has been placed on standby. Hubert pulled out of the parking lot and headed north toward Middleton. To hell with fairs. He needed to see his kids, needed to know they were safe. His ex-wife was probably just busy, probably had her phone on silent during work. She was a paralegal at a law firm downtown, methodical and organized, the kind of person who kept emergency supplies in the basement and actually read the instructions on fire extinguishers. She'd be fine. The kids would be fine. Traffic on University Avenue was heavier than usual, sluggish. Hubert took a side street cutting through residential neighborhoods where old houses sat close to the road and mature trees created a canopy overhead. His phone buzzed, a text from his ex. "Can't talk now." In a meeting. "Kids are fine. What's wrong?" He replied while stopped at a light. "Something happening at UW Medical Emergency." "Just worried." 3 dots appeared showing she was typing. Then, "News says it's contained. Don't panic. We'll call you later." The light changed. Hubert put the phone down and accelerated, but the unease in his gut wouldn't settle. He'd learned to trust that unease. It had kept him safe during the years when he'd driven night shifts, when he'd picked up drunks and addicts, and people running from things they wouldn't name. You developed an instinct for danger, for situations that could turn bad, for the moment when you needed to refuse a fare or call the police or just drive away fast. This felt worse than anything he'd sensed before. His dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio. "All units, be advised. We're getting reports of disturbances throughout the downtown area. Madison police are requesting that cabs avoid the campus and Capitol Square until further notice. Use caution and report any unusual activity." Hubert picked up the transmitter. "Unit 7, copy. What kind of disturbances?" A pause. "Unclear. Sounds like drunk and disorderly, but there's a lot of them. Just stay clear for now." He was passing the VA hospital when he saw the first one. A woman stumbling across the parking lot, her gait wrong, lurching and uncoordinated. She wore business casual clothes, but her blouse was torn and dark with something that looked like blood. Other people in the parking lot were backing away from her, shouting. A security guard approached, hands outstretched, trying to calm her. Hubert slowed without thinking, watching through his passenger window. The woman turned toward the security guard with a movement too fast, too sudden, and lunged at him. Even from 50 feet away, through closed windows, Hubert heard the scream. He accelerated hard, instinct overriding thought. In his rearview mirror, he saw more people running, scattering. The security guard was on the ground. The woman was on top of him, bent over him in a posture that looked wrong, feral. His phone rang, his ex-wife. He fumbled it to his ear. "Hello?" "Hubert, what the hell is going on? The firm is evacuating. They're saying something about an outbreak. Are you near the kids?" "I'm heading there now. What do you mean, outbreak?" "I don't know. Nobody knows, but there are people—" Her voice broke up, interference or panic making her words skip. "Attacking each other downtown. The police are overwhelmed. I need to get to Middleton, but the roads—" "Where are you?" "Still at the office. We're locked in. They told us not to leave, but I need to get my kids, Hubert. I'm going there now, he said, pressing the accelerator harder. I'll get them. I'll keep them safe. The school is in lockdown. They're not letting anyone in or out. I'll figure it out. Just stay where you are if they're telling you to stay. I'll get the kids. Hubert, Static crackled. Be careful. They're saying it's some kind of infection. That people are... The call dropped. Hubert tried calling back, but the network was busy. He tried again. Nothing. The radio erupted with overlapping voices, cabs and dispatch all trying to talk at once. Fight on State Street, multiple people. Need backup at the square? Someone attacked my passenger. What the hell? Everyone get off the roads! Hubert turned off University Avenue onto a smaller road, heading northwest toward Middleton. His hands were shaking. He gripped the wheel harder, forcing himself to breathe slowly, to think. The woman in the parking lot, the way she'd moved, the blood on her clothes, the security guard's scream, outbreak, infection, terrorist attack at a university lab. His mind tried to make the pieces fit into something rational, something that made sense in the world as he understood it. Gas leak, biological contaminant, chemical spill, things that happened in movies, in news reports about distant cities, not here, not in Madison on a Wednesday morning in April. He passed a gas station and saw people running from it, shouting. A man in a Packers jersey was chasing a teenager, moving with that same wrong gait, too fast and too uncoordinated at once. Hubert didn't slow down. His phone buzzed. A text from his dispatcher. All units cease operations. Return to base immediately. This is not a drill. Another text from his daughter. Dad, where are you? School won't let us leave. Mom isn't answering. He called her. The line was busy. He tried again, counting rings. 6, 7, 8. Dad? Rachel's voice was small, scared. Hey, baby. I'm on my way. Are you okay? Is Tommy with you? We're in the gym. They put all the kids in the gym and locked the doors. They won't tell us what's happening, but some of the teachers are crying. Dad, I'm scared. I know, honey. I know. But you're going to be okay. I need you to stay exactly where you are, stay with the teachers, and I'll come get you. When? Soon. As fast as I can. He swerved around. A car stopped in the middle of the road, horn blaring as someone pounded on its hood. Where's your brother? He's here. They got all the elementary kids, too. Mrs. Patterson is with us. She's Tommy's teacher. She's trying to keep everyone calm. That's good. That's really good. Listen to her, okay? And Rachel, stay on the phone with me. I want to hear your voice. Okay. A pause. Dad, people are saying there are zombies, like in movies. Is that true? Hubert's throat tightened. I don't know what's true yet, baby. But I know I'm going to get to you. That's the only thing that matters. They talked as he drove, Rachel describing the gym, the other kids, the teachers huddled by the doors with their phones. Hubert kept his voice calm, steady, the same voice he'd used when she'd had nightmares as a little girl, when he'd checked under beds for monsters and promised her the world was safe. He navigated side streets, avoiding main roads where he could see growing chaos through intersections. Cars crashed together, people running, distant sirens wailing in discordant chorus. Middleton was usually a 15-minute drive from where he'd been. Today it was taking twice that. Every route he tried blocked or clogged. He talked to Rachel the whole time, asking her questions about school, about her homework, about the new guinea pig her science class had gotten last week. Anything to keep her focused on normal things, to keep the fear out of her voice. Dad, they're making everyone turn off their phones, Rachel said suddenly. They say we need to preserve battery. I have to go. Wait, Rachel. I love you, Dad. I love you too, baby. So much. I'm coming. The line went dead. Hubert was on a residential street in Middleton now, rows of ranch houses with tidy lawns and basketball hoops over garage doors, a few blocks from the school. He could see it in the distance, a low brick building surrounded by playing fields and parking lots. Police cars blocked the main entrance, lights flashing. He parked 2 blocks away and ran. His knees protested. 18 years of sitting in a driver's seat had taken their toll. But he pushed through the discomfort, focusing on breathing, on forward motion. The rain had stopped, but the air felt thick, oppressive. The school's front doors were locked. Hubert pounded on them, peered through the glass into an empty hallway. No one came. He tried calling the main office, busy signal. He ran around the building, checking doors, all locked. Through windows, he could see classrooms empty of students, lights on, chairs pushed back from desks as if everyone had left in a hurry. At the gymnasium entrance, a separate building connected to the main school by a covered walkway, 2 teachers stood guard inside. One of them recognized him through the glass and opened the door a crack. "Mr. Weber?" Mrs. Patterson, Tommy's teacher. She was young, maybe 30, with blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her eyes were red. "You can't be here," the police said. "I know, but my kids are in there. Rachel and Tommy. I came to get them. We can't let anyone in or out. Those are the orders." "Orders from who? What's happening?" Mrs. Patterson glanced back over her shoulder, then stepped closer to the gap. "We don't know. The principal got a call from the superintendent, who got a call from emergency services. There's some kind of outbreak in Madison. People are getting sick and attacking others. They told us to shelter in place until they figure out what to do." "I can keep them safe," Hubert said. "I can take them somewhere away from the city." "We can't let anyone in or out," she repeated, but her voice wavered. "I'm sorry." "I have orders." Hubert pressed his palm against the door. "Please, they're my kids." Mrs. Patterson's face crumpled. "I have 80 children in there, 80, and only 6 teachers. If we start letting parents in, it'll be chaos, and what if—" She stopped herself. "What if what? What if one of them is sick? What if it spreads? We can't take that risk." Behind her, Hubert could hear children's voices, high and frightened. Somewhere in there, Rachel and Tommy were waiting, wondering when their father would come. "Let me talk to them," he said. "Please, just let me see them through the window." Mrs. Patterson hesitated, then nodded. She disappeared into the gym, and a few moments later, Rachel appeared, her face pressed against the glass. Tommy was beside her, smaller, his eyes wide. Hubert put his hand against the window, and Rachel matched it with hers, their palms separated by an inch of glass and an unbridgeable distance. He couldn't hear them, but he saw Rachel's mouth moving. "What's happening?" Hubert shook his head, pointed to his phone, mimed for her to call him. Rachel nodded and disappeared. A moment later, his phone rang. "Dad? Hey, baby?" His voice broke. "I'm right here. I can see you." "Why can't you come in?" "They won't let me." "But I'm not leaving. I'm going to stay right here, okay? I'm not going anywhere." "Are we going to be okay?" Hubert looked at his daughter through the glass, at his son standing beside her, and he lied with every fiber of his being. "Yes, you're going to be fine, both of you. I promise." They talked for a few more minutes, Hubert reassuring them, telling them to listen to Mrs. Patterson, to stay together, to be brave. Then Rachel had to go. The teachers were collecting phones again, trying to maintain order among 80 frightened children in a space meant for volleyball games and assemblies. Hubert stayed by the window after they left, watching the doors to the gym, as if his presence alone could keep them safe. Other parents began arriving, pounding on doors, shouting for their children. The police officers at the front entrance kept people back, their voices growing sharper. One parent tried to rush past them and was tackled, handcuffed, dragged away screaming about her rights. The situation was deteriorating. Hubert's phone buzzed. His dispatcher. "Hubert, where are you? You need to get off the streets. It's getting bad everywhere. Campus is overrun. Downtown is just get somewhere safe." He texted back, "At my kids' school. They won't let me in." A long pause, Then, maybe that's for the best. Stay away from crowds, away from anyone who seems sick. This thing spreads fast. Hubert sat on the curb near his cab, keeping the gym in sight. The afternoon wore on. More parents arrived and were turned away. Some left. Others, like Hubert, stayed, forming a small encampment of the desperate and worried. Someone had a radio, and they all listened to the news reports growing increasingly dire. The governor has declared a state of emergency for Dane County. Madison residents are urged to shelter in place. Do not attempt to flee the city. Avoid contact with anyone displaying symptoms of infection, including high fever, confusion, and aggressive behavior. Centers for Disease Control teams are en route to Wisconsin, but officials warn that containment efforts have been complicated by the rapid spread of the outbreak. What began as an isolated incident at the University of Wisconsin-Madison has now been reported in multiple locations throughout the city. Early reports suggest the infection may have originated from a research facility on campus. The university has not responded to requests for comment. Multiple faculty and students are confirmed dead or missing. Madison Police Department is reporting complete loss of communication with officers in the downtown area. Citizens are advised to remain in their homes and await further instructions. The sun, hidden behind gray clouds all day, began its descent toward the horizon. Shadows lengthened. The temperature dropped. Hubert sat on the curb watching the school and thought about all the times he'd promised his children he would protect them. The skinned knees he'd bandaged, the nightmares he'd soothed away, the bullies he'd called the school about, small protections, domestic dangers. Nothing had prepared him for this. His phone rang, his ex-wife. "Hubert, are you with them?" "I'm at the school. They won't let me in." "What? Why not?" "Lockdown. They're not letting anyone in or out." He could hear noise in the background of her call, shouting, something breaking. "Where are you?" "Still downtown." "We tried to leave the building, but Hubert, there are people in the streets. They're attacking anyone they see. We barricaded ourselves back inside, but I don't know how long." A crash, screaming. "We're safe here." "Stay inside," Hubert said. "Don't try to get to Middleton. The roads are blocked anyway. Just stay where you are." "My babies are in a locked building with teachers and police outside. They're safer than anywhere else right now." She was crying. "This can't be happening." "I know. You'll stay there? You won't leave them?" "I'm not going anywhere." The call ended. Night was falling. The streetlights flickered on, casting pools of yellow light across the suburban landscape. In the distance, toward Madison, the sky had an orange glow, fires burning somewhere. Smoke drifted on the wind, carrying the smell of burning plastic and something worse, something organic. More police arrived at the school, forming a perimeter. One of them, a sergeant with gray hair and a kind face that had gone hard with stress, approached the parents still gathered outside. "You all need to go home," he said. "It's not safe to be out here." "Our kids are in there," a woman said. "We're not leaving." "Ma'am, with all due respect, you're not helping them by staying here. You're just making our job harder. Go home. Lock your doors. We'll make sure the children are safe." "What's happening?" someone else asked. "What is this thing?" The sergeant's jaw tightened. "We don't know, but it's spreading fast. People who get infected become violent, aggressive. They attack without warning. We've lost—" He stopped himself. "Just go home, please." No one moved. The sergeant looked at them, this small group of parents who couldn't be separated from their children by fear or common sense, and something in his expression softened. "All right? But stay together. Stay quiet, and if I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" They nodded. The night deepened. The sounds from Madison grew louder. Sirens, gunshots, explosions. The orange glow in the sky intensified. Hubert tried calling his ex-wife again, but the network was down. He tried texting Rachel, but got no response. The school remained locked and silent. all its windows dark now except for emergency lights glowing in stairwells. Around 10 o'clock, they heard the screaming. It came from the direction of downtown, carrying across the miles of suburban sprawl. Not one voice but many, a chorus of terror and pain that rose and fell like a wave. The parents looked at each other, then at the police, who were talking urgently into their radios. "What's that?" someone whispered. The sergeant turned to them, his face pale in the streetlight. "You need to get inside your cars, now." "What about the kids?" "We'll protect the kids. You need to protect yourselves." Hubert didn't move. Neither did most of the others. They stood frozen, listening to the screaming grow closer, watching as the police drew their weapons. Then they saw them coming, dark shapes moving down the street, dozens of them, moving with that distinctive gait, lurching but fast, wrong but purposeful. The streetlights illuminated them in snapshots. A man in a torn business suit, his throat a mess of blood. A woman in a hospital gown, her arms raised and reaching. A teenager in a high school letter jacket, his face slack but his eyes wide and hungry. "Get inside your cars!" the sergeant shouted. "Now! Go!" The parents scattered. Hubert ran for his cab, fumbled with the keys. Behind him he heard the first gunshots, sharp cracks that echoed through the suburban night. He got the door open, threw himself inside, locked it. Through the windshield he watched the police fire into the approaching crowd. Some of the figures fell, most kept coming. One of them, the man in the business suit, spotted Hubert's cab and changed direction, heading straight for it. Hubert turned the ignition, the engine roaring to life. The man slammed into the driver's side window, his face pressed against the glass, and Hubert saw his eyes, milky, unfocused, pupils dilated to black pools. His mouth opened, revealing teeth stained dark, and he clawed at the window with fingers that left bloody smears. Hubert reversed hard, the cab shooting backward. The man stumbled, fell, but was already getting up again. More of them were coming, drawn by the noise, by the movement, by the presence of the living. The police were overwhelmed, falling back toward the school entrance. Hubert looked at the gym, at the dark building where his children slept or cried or held each other in fear, and he made a choice. He put the cab in drive and pressed the accelerator, heading straight for the infected. The impact was terrible. Bodies hit the hood, rolled over the roof, fell beneath the wheels. Hubert kept going, carving a path through them, heading for a gap in the mob. Something cracked. His windshield, a spider web of fractures spreading from where a woman's head had hit. He could barely see, but he kept driving, using memory and instinct to navigate. A hand thrust through the passenger window. He'd forgotten to check if it was fully closed, and grabbed for him. Hubert swerved, and the hand withdrew, leaving bloody streaks on the seat. He broke free of the mob and accelerated, not thinking about direction, just away from the school, away from his children, away from the promise he'd made to stay, because if he stayed, he would die, and if he died, he couldn't help them. That was the logic he told himself as he drove through Middleton's empty streets, as the screaming faded behind him, as the tears came hot and sudden. The cab limped along, making sounds it shouldn't make. Something was wrong with the alignment. The cracked windshield made it hard to see, but it still moved, still carried him away from the chaos, and that was all that mattered. Hubert drove aimlessly for a while, turning randomly, until he found himself on a small access road that led to a park. He pulled into the empty parking lot and killed the engine. Silence rushed in, thick and oppressive. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He tried his phone. No signal. He tried again. Nothing. The battery was at 20%. Outside, the night was quiet except for distant sounds. Sirens, gunshots, the low rumble of what might have been explosions. The orange glow over Madison had spread, engulfing more of the sky. Smoke obscured the stars. Hubert sat in his damaged cab in an empty parking lot and thought about his children locked in a gym, protected by police who might already be dead, waiting for a father who had driven away. The guilt was physical, a weight in his chest that made it hard to breathe. He'd been a cab driver for 18 years. He knew Madison streets better than anyone. He knew shortcuts and backways and routes that avoided traffic. He knew how to navigate in fog and snow and darkness. He knew how to read a city's rhythms, how to sense danger, how to get from any point to any other point efficiently and safely. None of that mattered now. He dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every sound, reaching for his phone to check for messages that never came. When dawn broke gray and cold, he started the engine and drove back toward Middleton, toward the school, toward his children. The streets looked different in daylight. Cars sat abandoned at angles, doors hanging open. Bodies lay in yards and on sidewalks, some torn and broken, others seemingly untouched but still unnaturally still. Hubert drove slowly, scanning for movement, for any sign of the infected. He saw a few in the distance, wandering aimlessly, but they didn't seem to notice the cab. The school was burning. Hubert saw the smoke first, a column rising black and oily into the morning sky. Then the flames, visible through broken windows. The police cars were still there, but their doors hung open, their windshields shattered. Bodies in uniforms lay scattered around the perimeter. He parked a block away and approached on foot, calling his children's names. The front doors were torn open, hanging from their hinges. Inside, the hallway was dark, emergency lights flickering. There was blood on the walls, on the floor, drag marks leading deeper into the building. "Rachel? Tommy?" His voice echoed in the empty corridor. The gym doors were open. Hubert stumbled through them and stopped. The space was devastated, bodies everywhere. Small bodies, child-sized bodies, scattered across the floor like discarded toys. Backpacks and shoes and lunch boxes strewn among them. The walls were splattered with blood. The smell was overwhelming, copper and shit and smoke. Hubert fell to his knees, searching faces, praying he wouldn't find what he was looking for. Some of the children had clearly been attacked, their small forms torn and broken. Others looked like they'd died from the fire, smoke inhalation, their skin gray but bodies intact. Teachers lay among them, some clearly having fought to protect their charges, others simply overcome. He found Mrs. Patterson near the back wall, her arms wrapped around two children. Neither of them were his. He checked methodically, forcing himself to look at each face, each body, cataloging details his mind would never forget but his heart refused to accept. Rachel wasn't there. Tommy wasn't there. Hubert searched the whole gym twice. Then the adjoining rooms, the bathrooms, the equipment closets. His children were not among the dead, which meant they might have escaped, might have run when the infected broke through, might still be alive somewhere. He left the school running, calling their names, checking nearby houses. Nothing. No sign of them. No sign of anyone living. His phone had no signal. His cab was running on fumes. The morning sun climbed higher, revealing more of the devastation. Middleton was a cemetery, a silent suburb full of the dead and the undead. Hubert got back in his cab and drove toward Madison. If his children had survived, if they'd fled, they might have tried to reach their mother downtown. It was a thin hope, nearly hopeless, but it was all he had. The roads into the city were clogged with abandoned vehicles. Hubert navigated around them, using sidewalks when necessary, his battered cab scraping against curbs and mailboxes. The damage didn't matter. Nothing mattered except finding Rachel and Tommy. Downtown Madison was a war zone. University Avenue, usually full of students and traffic, was completely empty except for the infected. They wandered in groups drawn to noise and movement. Hubert counted at least 30 in the 2 blocks he could see. More stumbled from buildings, from alleys, attracted by the sound of his engine. He tried to remember where his ex-wife's law firm was. State Street, he thought, near the Capitol. He'd picked her up from work a few times, back when they were still married. Back when he'd surprised her with lunch dates and flowers, State Street was worse than University. The infected filled it like a slow-moving river, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They clustered around storefronts and in doorways, some feeding on bodies in the street, others simply standing still as if waiting for something to activate them. Hubert couldn't drive through them, couldn't risk it. But maybe he could reach the capital on foot, moving quietly, using the skills he'd developed as a cab driver, reading situations, finding safe paths, knowing when to avoid trouble. He parked on a side street and checked his supplies. A tire iron in the trunk, a first aid kit, a bottle of water half full, his phone battery at 12%, his wallet with $60 cash, and a picture of his kids from 2 Christmases ago, both of them grinning, gap-toothed and happy. He took the tire iron and left everything else. The walk to the Capitol was 6 blocks. 6 blocks through the heart of Madison, through streets he'd driven 10,000 times, now transformed into something from a nightmare. The first 2 blocks went smoothly. He stayed close to buildings, moved quietly, stopped whenever he saw movement. The infected were drawn to sound and motion. He'd figured that much out. But they seemed to have trouble with stillness. If he froze when they looked his way, they often lost interest, wandering off to seek more obvious prey. On the 3rd block, he saw another survivor, a woman hiding in a doorway, eyes wild, clutching a broken bottle. She saw Hubert and pressed a finger to her lips. He nodded and crept past. Behind him, he heard her whimper softly, a sound of pure terror that nearly undid him. The 4th block was filled with infected, at least 40 of them, clustered around what looked like the remains of a barricade. Hubert couldn't go through them. He tried a parallel street, found it blocked by a burning car. Tried another route, found more infected. Time was passing. The sun was higher now, warming the air, and with the warmth came the smell of death intensifying. He was wasting time, getting nowhere, and his children could be dying while he fumbled through streets he'd thought he knew. He heard his name, faint, distant, but definitely his name, Hubert. He turned, trying to locate the source. There, a window on the 2nd floor of a brick building, someone waving. He squinted. It was a colleague, another cab driver named Felix who worked the night shift. "Up here?" Felix called, voice barely above a whisper but carrying in the unnatural quiet. "You alone?" Hubert nodded. "Back door is open. Be quiet." Hubert found the entrance, a law office, locked but with the glass broken from the door. He climbed through carefully, avoiding the shards, and found stairs leading up. Felix met him on the 2nd floor landing. "Jesus, man, I thought I was the only one left," Felix said. He was a big guy, former construction worker who'd switched to driving cabs after a back injury. His hands were shaking. "What are you doing out there?" "Looking for my kids." They were at school in Middleton. I think they might have tried to reach their mom downtown. Felix's expression went pained. "Hubert, downtown is gone. Everyone who was there when this started is either dead or one of those things. You don't know that. I was on State Street when it happened. I was picking up a fare when my passenger, this college kid, seemed totally normal, just went crazy, started attacking me, biting, trying to grab me. I barely got out of the cab. And then it was everywhere, Hubert. People turning on each other, spreading it like wildfire. I saw the cops try to stop it. They couldn't. Nobody could. My ex-wife was at her law firm on State Street. My kids might have tried to reach her." Felix shook his head slowly. "There's nobody left on State Street. Trust me, I've been watching from these windows since yesterday afternoon. It's just those things out there now." Hubert looked out the window. From this height, he could see the Capitol dome rising above the surrounding buildings. Beyond it, State Street stretched toward campus, packed with infected. Felix was right. Nobody living could have survived in that. But he had to try. "Thanks for the warning," Hubert said, turning back toward the stairs. "Wait. Where are you going?" "Capitol." If my ex-wife made it out of her building, that's where she would have gone. It's the highest ground, the most defensible position. She's smart. She would have thought of that. That's suicide. Then I'll die trying to find my kids. Hubert descended the stairs. Behind him, Felix called, "At least take this." Something clattered down the stairs, a crowbar. Better than a tire iron. Hubert picked it up, nodded his thanks, and left the building. The Capitol Square was the heart of Madison, a park surrounding the white dome of the state Capitol building. Usually it was full of tourists and protesters and farmers' markets. Today it was a killing ground. Bodies covered the grass. Infected wandered among them, some feeding, others just moving in aimless circles. The Capitol building itself had clearly been a refuge at some point. The doors were barricaded from inside, windows broken by people trying to escape or trying to get in. Blood streaked the white stone like obscene graffiti. Hubert approached from the east, moving from car to car, using them as cover. His phone vibrated. A text message had gotten through. He checked it, hands shaking. From Rachel. "Dad, help, please, we're trapped. Mom hurt bad, we can't get out, please." The timestamp was 6 hours old. His chest constricted. He tried to reply, "Where are you?" The message failed to send. He tried again. Failed. The network was up just enough to torment him with old messages, but not enough to communicate. He tried calling. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, someone answered. Not Rachel. A woman's voice, weak and slurred. "Hello? Who is this? Where's Rachel?" The phone was on the floor. "There are children here. They're hiding." "Where? Where are you?" "Law office, Kellner and Associates, State Street. But the doors won't hold much longer. Those things keep—" A crash, screaming in the background. "Keep trying to get in. We barricaded, but they're so strong. I'm coming. Hold on. I'm coming." The line went dead. Kellner and Associates. He knew it. 2 blocks west of the Capitol, 3rd floor of a building that used to be a bank. He'd picked up his ex-wife from there dozens of times. 2 blocks, through hundreds of infected, in broad daylight, with a crowbar. Hubert looked at the Capitol, at the infected swarming around it, and made a calculation. He needed a distraction, something loud enough to draw them away from State Street, even temporarily. His cab was 2 blocks behind him. If he could get to it, if he could drive it into something, create enough noise. He backtracked, moving quickly now, caution taking a back seat to desperate urgency. The infected he passed barely registered him. They seemed less active in daylight, more sluggish, though no less dangerous if provoked. He reached his cab, got in, turned the ignition. The engine coughed, sputtered, but started. The fuel gauge showed empty, but Hubert had learned long ago not to trust gauges in old Crown Victorias. There was usually a gallon or 2 left even when the needle hit 0. He drove toward Capitol Square, accelerating, and at the last second cranked the wheel hard, sending the cab into a light pole. The impact was tremendous. Airbag deploying, metal crumpling, glass shattering. The horn started blaring, a sustained note that echoed across the square. Hubert kicked open the door, stumbled out. Around him, the infected were reacting to the noise, turning, beginning to converge on the wrecked cab. He ran west, toward State Street, as hundreds of them followed the sound. The law office building was old stone, 3 stories, with a coffee shop on the ground floor that had been completely destroyed. The door was off its hinges. Inside, the stairwell was dark and narrow. Hubert took the stairs 2 at a time, crowbar ready. The 3rd floor hallway was a disaster. Office doors hung open, furniture overturned, papers scattered everywhere. At the far end, one door was still intact, barricaded from inside with filing cabinets and desks. Hubert pounded on it. "Rachel! Tommy! It's Dad!" Silence. Then shuffling sounds. A child's voice. "Dad?" "Rachel, baby, it's me. Open the door." "We can't." There are too many things in the way. Then move them. I'm going to help you from out here. Together they worked, Hubert pulling at the filing cabinet from the hallway while people inside pushed. It scraped across the floor inch by inch until finally there was a gap wide enough for a person to slip through. Rachel came through first, launching herself at Hubert with enough force to knock him back. She was filthy, tear-stained, but alive. Tommy followed, smaller, shaking, his face blank with shock. "Where's Mom?" Hubert asked, pulling them both close. "Inside. She's hurt. Something bit her yesterday." Ice flooded Hubert's veins. "Bit her?" He squeezed through the gap into the office. His ex-wife lay on a couch in what had been a conference room covered with coats. Even from the doorway he could see the fever. Her skin was gray, slick with sweat. Her eyes opened as he approached, and she smiled weakly. "Hubert, you came." "Of course I came." He knelt beside her, took her hand. It was burning hot. "What happened?" "One of them got into the building yesterday. I fought it off, but it bit my arm. I thought I was okay, but..." She gestured helplessly at herself. "It's spreading. I can feel it. The fever, the confusion. I don't have much time. We'll get you help. We'll..." "There's no help, Hubert. Look at me. You know what I'm becoming." He did. He could see it in her eyes, the way her pupils were starting to dilate, the way her focus kept slipping. The infection was taking her. "The kids," she whispered. "You have to take them somewhere safe." "I will. Promise me. Promise me you won't let me hurt them." Hubert's throat closed. He looked at Rachel and Tommy standing in the doorway, watching their mother die. "I promise." "There's a gun," his ex-wife said, "in the desk drawer. One of the lawyers kept it hidden. I found it yesterday, thought it might..." She trailed off, her eyes losing focus. When they cleared again, they were different, harder, hungrier. "Hubert, do it now, before I change completely." "I can't." "You have to. For them." Her hand squeezed his with surprising strength. "I love you. I always did. Even after everything. I love you and I love our children and I need you to keep them safe. Please." Hubert found the gun in the desk drawer. A small revolver, 6 shots. His hands shook so badly he almost dropped it. "Kids, go out in the hallway," he said. "No," Rachel said. "We want to stay with Mom." "Rachel, please, Dad." "She's our mom." He looked at his ex-wife, at the woman he'd married 20 years ago, who'd given birth to their children, who'd packed their lunches and gone to their school plays and loved them with every fiber of her being. She nodded. "It's okay," she said. "Let them say goodbye." Rachel and Tommy went to her, hugged her carefully. She whispered to them, words Hubert couldn't hear. They cried, she cried. And then the moment came when her body went rigid, when her breathing changed, when something fundamental shifted behind her eyes. "Now, Hubert," she gasped. "Please, now." He fired once. The sound was deafening in the small room. His ex-wife's body jerked once and went still, truly still, forever still. Rachel and Tommy were screaming. Hubert dropped the gun and pulled them to him, holding them as they sobbed, as they called for their mother, as they tried to understand the incomprehensible. "We have to go," he said finally when their cries had diminished to shudders. "We can't stay here." "Where?" Rachel asked, her voice small and broken. "I don't know, but somewhere away from the city. Somewhere safe." They left the office, left their mother's body behind. The hallway was still empty, but from below came sounds of movement, the infected, drawn by the gunshot, beginning to fill the building. Hubert led his children down the back stairs, moving quickly but quietly. They emerged into an alley choked with garbage and abandoned cars. The afternoon sun was bright, harsh, revealing every terrible detail of the dead city. "Dad?" Tommy said, his voice very small. "I'm scared." "I know, buddy. Me too." Hubert squeezed his son's hand. "But we're together. That's what matters. They moved through the alleys, heading away from downtown, away from the Capitol and State Street, and all the death concentrated there. Hubert tried to remember the city's layout, to plan a route to somewhere, anywhere that might be safe. But everywhere he looked, he saw infected, saw bodies, saw the end of the world they'd known. His phone buzzed. Battery at 5%. A text from his dispatcher. "If you get this, there's a group gathering at the Alliant Energy Center. Military is supposed to evacuate survivors. Get there if you can." Hubert showed Rachel. "Can you remember that address?" She nodded. "Good. If anything happens to me, if we get separated, you take Tommy and you get there. Understand? Don't say that, Dad. I need you to understand. You're the oldest. You have to take care of your brother." "I will." Her voice was steady now, older than her 12 years. "I promise." They kept moving. The Alliant Energy Center was on the south side of town, maybe 3 miles from where they were. In normal times, an easy walk. Today, it might as well have been on the moon. Hubert tried to keep them to side streets, to residential areas where the infected were fewer. But there was no pattern to where they appeared, no logic to their distribution. Sometimes entire blocks were empty. Sometimes dozens of them clustered around a single house or car. They were passing through a neighborhood of older homes when Tommy spotted a bicycle lying in a yard. "Dad, can I ride that?" Hubert hesitated. The bike would be faster than walking, but it would also be louder. But Tommy was getting tired, his small legs struggling to keep pace. "Okay," but quietly. No ringing the bell, no noise. Tommy climbed onto the bike, too big for him, and wobbled forward. Rachel walked beside him, steadying him when he veered. Hubert led them, crowbar in hand, scanning constantly for threats. They made it 2 more blocks before the horde found them. They came from the east, pouring around a corner in a wave of grasping hands and gnashing teeth. At least 50 of them, maybe more, moving with terrible purpose. Hubert had no time to think, only to react. "Run!" he shouted. "Run now!" Rachel grabbed Tommy's bike and pushed, helping him pedal faster. They ran down the middle of the street, no time for stealth or caution. Behind them, the infected followed, their moans rising in volume as more joined the chase. Hubert's lungs burned, his legs screamed, but he kept running, kept pushing forward, because his children were ahead of him and he would die before he let those things catch them. They turned a corner onto a main road, Regent Street, Hubert recognized it, and saw cars. Dozens of them, abandoned in the middle of the street. Hubert scanned them desperately, looking for one with keys, with open doors, with any way to escape. There, a pickup truck, door hanging open. He ran to it, looked inside. No keys. He checked the ignition anyway, hoping someone had left them, but found nothing. The infected were getting closer. He could hear their footsteps, their breathing, the terrible sounds they made. "Get in the truck bed," Hubert told his children. "Climb in and lie flat." They obeyed without question. Hubert checked the other cars, frantically searching for keys for any vehicle that would start. Nothing. Nothing. The infected were visible now, rounding the corner, spreading across the street. He ran back to the truck. "Stay down. Don't move. Don't make a sound." "Dad, what are you doing?" Rachel asked, her face pale. "Leading them away. When they're gone, you go south. Alliant Energy Center. Remember?" "No, no, Dad, don't..." But he was already running, crowbar in hand, shouting to draw the infected's attention. They turned toward him, toward the noise and movement, and he led them away from the truck, away from his children, into a side street filled with more cars and debris. The horde followed him. All of them. Hubert ran until his chest felt like it would explode, until his vision went gray at the edges, until he couldn't take another step. He found himself near the Capitol again, somehow having run in a circle. The infected were everywhere now, converging from all directions. His phone rang. He fumbled it out of his pocket. Rachel. "Dad, where are you?" "Don't worry about me. Just get to the Alliance Center. We can't leave you." "You have to. Take care of your brother." The infected were close now, so close he could smell them, could see the details of their ruined faces. "Rachel, baby, I love you so much. You and Tommy both. Tell him I love him. Tell him." A hand grabbed his shoulder. Hubert spun, crowbar swinging, but there were too many of them. They pulled him down, bore him to the ground through sheer weight and numbers. He tried to fight, tried to swing the crowbar, but his arms were pinned. The phone was still in his hand, still connected. Through it, he could hear his children crying, calling his name. "Dad?" "Dad, please." "I love you," Hubert said one more time. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The teeth found his throat. The pain was immense, all-consuming. The phone fell from his hand, clattered on the pavement. Through dimming vision, Hubert could see the Capitol dome rising above him, white stone against gray sky. From the phone, Rachel's voice. "Daddy, please." "When are you coming?" "Dad? Dad?" He tried to answer, but his throat wouldn't work anymore. Tried to reach for the phone, but his arms wouldn't move. The world was going dark, sound fading, everything receding except that voice, his daughter's voice, pleading for a father who couldn't come. "Dad? Are you there? Please answer. Dad?" The last thing Hubert heard was his children calling for him, their voices growing distant as the darkness took him. As 18 years of driving Madison's streets ended here, on pavement he'd crossed 10,000 times, unable to reach the only destination that had ever truly mattered. The phone lay on the ground beside his body, still connected, still carrying those voices. "Dad? Dad?" Into the empty air, unanswered. Now let's move on to the next story. The night shift at the distribution center always started the same way. Woodrow clocked in at 11:45, 15 minutes early like always, and grabbed his scanner from the charging station near the supervisor's office. The device was still warm, and he clipped it to his belt before heading to the break room for coffee. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting their sterile glow across the concrete floors that stretched out in every direction. This place was massive, 300,000 square feet of shelving, pallets, and inventory stacked 20 feet high in some sections. He'd worked here for 8 years, long enough to know every aisle, every dock door, every shortcut through the maze of product. The coffee was shit, as usual, burnt and bitter, but it was hot and free, and that was enough at midnight. Woodrow filled his thermos, added 3 sugars, and stirred it with a wooden stick that snapped in half. He tossed both pieces in the trash and took a sip, feeling the liquid scald his tongue. Outside the break room windows, he could see the loading docks where 3 semi-trucks sat backed up to the bays, their drivers probably sleeping in the cabs. The parking lot beyond was half empty. Night shift was always skeletal, just 20 people to handle receiving, picking, and loading for the next day's deliveries. His mama had called earlier, around 10, before he left his apartment in East Birmingham. She did that most nights he worked, checking in, making sure he was eating right, asking when he'd come visit her in Bessemer. It was only 30 minutes away, but with his schedule, 4 nights on, 3 off, rotating, it was hard to find time. He'd promised her Sunday. 2 more shifts after tonight, then his days off. He'd drive out there, eat her cooking, help fix whatever was broken around her house. Last time it was the screen door that wouldn't close right. Time before that, the garbage disposal. Small things, but she was 71 and living alone since his father died 6 years back. She needed him, even if she'd never say it directly. Woodrow finished his coffee in the break room and checked his phone. A few messages in the group chat from his cousin about a Crimson Tide game, a notification from his bank about his direct deposit clearing. Nothing urgent. He pocketed the phone and headed out to the main warehouse floor. The shift supervisor, Leroy, was already there, standing near the receiving area with a clipboard. Leroy was 50-something, stocky, with gray hair cut military short and reading glasses perpetually perched on his nose. He'd been with the company for 25 years and ran the night shift like a tight ship. No nonsense, but fair. If you did your work and didn't cause problems, Leroy left you alone. "Woodrow," Leroy said, looking up from his clipboard. "Got you on receiving tonight. We've got 2 trucks to unload, then I need you on the reach truck in Zone C. Inventory count came up short last week, and corporate's breathing down my neck." "Yes, sir," Woodrow said. He liked receiving. Physical work, straightforward. Unload the truck, scan the items, sort them to the proper zones, stack them on pallets. His body was built for it. 6'2", 230 pounds, most of it muscle from years of labor. He'd played football in high school, defensive end, but never had the grades or the money for college. The warehouse wasn't glamorous, but it paid $15.50 an hour, had benefits, and kept him busy. That was enough. The first truck was full of boxed electronics. Tablets mostly, stacked on pallets and shrink-wrapped. Woodrow backed the pallet jack into the trailer and started pulling them out one by one, scanning each pallet's barcode and checking it against the manifest. The work was rhythmic, mechanical. Pull, scan, check, stack. His mind wandered while his body moved. He thought about his mama's voice on the phone earlier, asking about Sunday, making sure he'd bring his laundry so she could wash it. She always did that, even though he'd told her 100 times he could do his own laundry. It made her feel useful, he figured, made her feel like she was still taking care of him. Around 1:30 in the morning, Leroy walked past with his radio crackling. Woodrow caught fragments of the conversation, something about a delay on the 3rd truck, driver stuck in traffic on I-20. That was unusual for this time of night. I-20 was usually clear after midnight, especially the stretch between here and Atlanta. Leroy didn't look concerned, though, just annoyed. He keyed his radio and told the driver to keep him updated. Woodrow finished unloading the first truck and moved to the second. This one was heavier, appliances mostly, small refrigerators and microwaves. He switched to the forklift for these, maneuvering the machine into the trailer and lifting the pallets with practiced ease. He'd been certified on the forklift for 7 years, and he could thread it through gaps most drivers wouldn't attempt. The warehouse echoed with the beep-beep-beep of the machine as he reversed, the whir of hydraulics as he lifted, the clang of metal forks against pallets. By 2:15, both trucks were empty, and Woodrow was logging the inventory into the system at the receiving desk. The computer was old, running slow, and he waited for each screen to load while he sipped more coffee. Around him, the warehouse was alive with quiet activity. Other workers moved through the aisles with pallet jacks and order pickers, their scanners beeping, their voices occasional and low. The overhead lights created pools of brightness separated by shadows, and the whole place smelled like cardboard and dust and the faint chemical tang of shrink wrap. That's when he noticed the TV in the break room. Someone had left it on, and through the window he could see the local news playing. Normally nobody watched it, just background noise. But now there were 3 workers clustered around it, staring at the screen. Woodrow wiped his hands on his jeans and walked over. The news anchor looked tense, her face pale under the studio lights. She was reading from a teleprompter, but her eyes kept flicking down to something off-screen, and her voice had a tremor in it. Authorities are asking residents near the UAB medical campus to remain indoors. Reports of an incident at one of the research laboratories remain unconfirmed, but emergency services have been dispatched to the area. We're told the situation is contained, but out of an abundance of caution, nearby streets have been closed to traffic. One of the workers, a young guy named Terrence who worked in shipping, let out a low whistle. UAB? That's what, 10 minutes from here? Less, said another worker, an older woman named Donna. My daughter goes there, medical school. She pulled out her phone, her fingers moving quickly over the screen. Woodrow watched the news for another minute. The anchor was talking about a chemical spill now, maybe, or a containment breach. The details were vague, and the station kept cutting to a helicopter shot of the UAB campus. The video was grainy, shot from high up, and didn't show much, just buildings, parking lots, and flashing lights from emergency vehicles. Nothing that looked particularly dangerous. "Probably nothing," Terrence said. "Remember last year? They had that scare about some virus in the biology building, and it turned out to be nothing." Woodrow shrugged. He didn't follow the news much. Too depressing, too much noise. He went back to the receiving desk and finished logging the inventory, then grabbed the reach truck keys from Leroy's office. Zone C was near the back of the warehouse, where they stored overstock and seasonal items. His job was to pull inventory from the high shelves and verify the counts against the system. Boring work, but it required precision. One wrong count and the whole inventory could be off, and then corporate would come down hard. The reach truck was taller and narrower than a standard forklift, designed to navigate the tight aisles and reach shelves up to 25 feet. Woodrow climbed into the cage, buckled the harness, and raised himself to the second level. From up here, he could see across most of the warehouse, the rows of shelving stretching out like a grid. It was almost beautiful in its organization, its efficiency. Everything had a place. Everything had a purpose. He started the count, scanning items and typing quantities into the handheld device. The minutes blurred together. Scan, count, type. Move to the next item. Scan, count, type. His lower back ached from standing, and his shoulders were tight from lifting earlier. He stretched, rolling his neck, and that's when he heard shouting. It came from near the front of the warehouse, over by the offices. Raised voices, urgent, and then something that sounded like a scream, short and sharp and cut off. Woodrow lowered the reach truck and climbed out, his pulse quickening. The shouting continued, and now he could hear running footsteps echoing off the concrete. He jogged toward the commotion, past rows of shelving, his work boots heavy on the floor. As he got closer, he saw a cluster of workers gathered near the break room, and Leroy was there, his radio in hand, talking fast. Donna was on the ground, sitting with her back against the wall, crying. Terrence stood over her, his face pale. "What happened?" Woodrow asked, pushing through the small crowd. Leroy turned, and Woodrow saw something in his expression that made his stomach tighten. Fear, real, unfiltered fear. "Donna's daughter," Leroy said. "She called. Something's happening at UAB. She said people are attacking each other. Said the campus is going crazy." "Attacking?" Woodrow frowned. "Like a fight?" "She said biting." Leroy's voice was flat, like he didn't believe the words coming out of his own mouth. "Said people are biting each other, that there's blood everywhere." Then the call cut off. Donna let out a sob, and Terrence knelt beside her, putting a hand on her shoulder. Woodrow felt something cold settle in his chest. Biting. That didn't make sense. None of this made sense. "Maybe it's drugs," someone said from the crowd. "PCP or something. Makes people go nuts." "Or terrorism," another voice added. "Some kind of chemical attack." Leroy held up a hand, silencing the speculation. "Everyone stay calm. I'm calling corporate, finding out what we're supposed to do. In the meantime, nobody leaves the building. We lock the doors, we stay inside, we wait for more information." The workers murmured, uneasy, but nobody argued. Leroy walked back to his office, and the crowd started to disperse. Woodrow stayed where he was, his mind turning over what he'd heard. Biting. Attacking. The news had said something about a lab incident at UAB. Maybe it was connected. Maybe something had gotten out. A virus? Bacteria? He thought about movies he'd seen, books he'd read. Zombie shit. But that was fiction. That wasn't real. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a text from his mama. "You watching the news? They saying something bad happening near you?" You okay, baby? He typed back quickly. I'm fine, Mama, at work. Everything's fine here. Her response came almost immediately. You call me if anything happens. You hear me? You call me right now if something wrong. I will, Mama. Don't worry. Love you. He pocketed the phone and looked around the warehouse. The other workers had returned to their tasks, but there was a tension in the air now, a nervous energy. People kept glancing toward the windows, toward the doors. Woodrow walked to the front of the building, where a row of windows looked out over the parking lot. Beyond the lot, he could see the street, and beyond that, the glow of Birmingham's downtown skyline. Everything looked normal, quiet, empty, just another night. But then he noticed the sirens, faint at first, distant but growing louder. Lots of them, overlapping, coming from different directions. Ambulances, police, fire trucks, all converging somewhere to the south, toward UAB. Woodrow stood at the window and watched. The sirens kept coming, more and more, until they were a constant wail in the distance. And then he saw the first sign that something was truly wrong. A car came racing down the street outside the warehouse, going at least 70 in a 45 zone. It ran the red light at the intersection without slowing, tires squealing as it took the corner too fast. Seconds later, another car followed, just as fast, just as reckless. Then another and another. Jesus, Woodrow muttered. He pressed his face closer to the glass, trying to see where they were coming from. More cars appeared, some with their headlights off, some swerving across lanes. One clipped a light pole and kept going, the side mirror hanging loose and sparking against the asphalt. Behind him, he heard footsteps. Leroy appeared at his side, breathing hard, his face slick with sweat. "Corporate's not answering," Leroy said. "I tried the regional manager, the district supervisor, even the emergency hotline. Nothing. Just busy signals or voicemail." "What about the cops?" Woodrow asked. "Call 911? "Tried that too. Busy signal." Leroy's voice cracked. "How the hell is 911 giving a busy signal?" They stood together at the window, watching more cars race past. Some of them had people hanging out the windows, screaming, though Woodrow couldn't hear the words through the glass. One car had a man in the passenger seat, shirtless, covered in what looked like blood. He was pounding on the windshield from the inside, and the driver was trying to push him away while steering. "We need to lock down," Leroy said. "All the doors. No one in, no one out." "What about the trucks?" Woodrow asked. "The drivers?" Leroy looked at him, and Woodrow saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. 3 truck drivers, asleep in their cabs outside. If they locked the doors, those drivers would be stuck out there. "Go wake them," Leroy said finally. "Bring them inside." Then we locked down. Woodrow nodded and headed for the loading docks. The roll-up doors were still open, and the cool night air rushed in, carrying the smell of diesel and asphalt. He walked to the first truck, a big freightliner, and climbed up on the running board to knock on the driver's door. No answer. He knocked louder, rattling the metal. Hey man, wake up, you need to come inside." The curtain behind the windshield moved, and a moment later the door swung open. The driver was a middle-aged white guy with a beard, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What's going on?" "Emergency?" Woodrow said. "Something happening in the city. We're locking down the building. You need to come inside." The driver frowned, then reached for his phone. He looked at the screen and his expression changed. "Shit. I got like 50 missed calls." He climbed down from the cab, grabbing a jacket and a backpack. "What kind of emergency?" "Don't know yet," Woodrow said. "Just get inside." He moved to the second truck and repeated the process. This driver was younger, black, and took less convincing. As soon as he heard the word emergency, he was out of the cab and jogging toward the building. The third truck was different. When Woodrow knocked on the door, the curtain moved, but the door didn't open. He knocked again, harder. "Hey! Open up!" Through the window he could see movement inside the cab, but it was jerky, unnatural. The curtain thrashed, and he heard a thump against the metal. Then the door flew open, and a man stumbled out. Or something that had been a man. The driver's face was gray, his eyes milky and unfocused. Blood covered the front of his shirt, fresh and wet, and his mouth hung open, revealing teeth stained dark red. He moved like a puppet with tangled strings, lurching forward, and the smell that came off him was overwhelming, rot and copper and something else, something foul and organic. Woodrow stumbled back, almost falling off the running board. Jesus Christ! The driver, if that's what it still was, reached for him, fingers grasping. Woodrow shoved him away, and the man fell to the pavement with a wet smack. But he didn't stay down. He rolled onto his stomach and started crawling toward Woodrow, dragging himself forward with his arms, his mouth opening and closing, making a low gurgling sound. "Leroy!" Woodrow shouted. "Leroy, we got a problem!" He backed toward the loading dock, unable to take his eyes off the thing crawling after him. It wasn't moving fast, but it was relentless, dragging itself forward inch by inch, leaving a smear of blood on the concrete. Leroy appeared at the dock door, took one look, and went pale. "What the fuck is that?" "I don't know." Woodrow climbed up onto the dock, his heart hammering. He came out of the truck like that. Something's wrong with him. The other two drivers had joined them now, and all four men stood at the edge of the dock, staring down at the crawling figure. It had made it halfway across the loading bay, and now it was trying to stand, pushing itself up on shaking legs. "Hit the door button," Leroy said, his voice tight. "Close the dock door. Now." Woodrow slapped the button on the wall, and the roll-up door began to descend with a mechanical whine. The driver, or whatever it was, looked up at the sound, and for a moment, Woodrow's eyes locked with its milky gaze. There was nothing there. No recognition, no humanity. Just hunger. The door closed with a heavy thud, sealing them inside. Woodrow could hear the thing on the other side, scratching at the metal, making that terrible gurgling sound. It went on for minutes, constant and rhythmic, before finally fading into silence. "What the fuck was that?" one of the truck drivers whispered. Nobody answered. Nobody knew. Leroy pulled out his radio and keyed it. "All personnel, this is Leroy. Emergency lockdown. Close and secure all doors immediately. Do not go outside for any reason. Do not let anyone inside who you don't recognize. I repeat, do not let anyone inside. Acknowledge." The radio crackled as workers responded, their voices tight with fear and confusion. Woodrow could hear the dock doors closing in other sections of the warehouse, the heavy metallic thuds echoing through the building. "Everyone to the break room," Leroy said. "We need to figure out what's going on." They walked back through the warehouse, past pallets and shelving, past forklifts sitting idle, their keys still in the ignition. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, steady and indifferent. The other workers were already gathering in the break room, clustering around the TV. The local news was still on, but now the anchor was gone. Instead, the screen showed footage from a helicopter circling above Birmingham. The video was chaotic, streets packed with cars, some of them crashed, some burning. People running in every direction, and other figures moving differently, stumbling and lurching, chasing the runners. "Oh my God," Donna whispered. She was still sitting on the floor, her phone pressed to her ear, but there was no one on the other end. Just silence. Woodrow watched the screen, trying to process what he was seeing. The helicopter camera zoomed in on a street corner, and he saw a woman in a bathrobe get tackled by 3 of those stumbling figures. They fell on her, and even without sound, he could see her mouth open in a scream. Then the camera cut away, and the news station logo appeared with a message. "Please stand by. Technical difficulties." "We need to call someone," Terrence said. "The police? The National Guard? Someone." "I told you," Leroy snapped. "Lines are down or jammed. We're on our own." "Then what do we do?" We stay here, Leroy said. We lock the doors, we stay quiet, and we wait. This building is secure. It's got food, water, bathrooms. We can wait this out. Wait what out? Someone asked. What the hell is even happening? Woodrow thought about the driver outside, crawling toward him with that dead expression. He thought about the news footage, the people running, the figures chasing them. He thought about his mama, alone in Bessemer, probably watching the same news, probably scared out of her mind. He pulled out his phone and dialed her number. It rang once, twice, then clicked to voicemail. He hung up and tried again. Same result. He sent a text. Mama, I'm okay. Stay inside. Lock your doors. I'll call you soon as I can. The message sent, but he had no way of knowing if she'd get it. Cell service was spotty now, the signal bars on his phone flickering between 2 and 0. Around him, the other workers were having similar conversations, calling loved ones, getting voicemails or busy signals or nothing at all. Donna was still on the floor, rocking back and forth, her phone clutched in both hands. Terrence sat beside her, his face in his hands. Woodrow walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. More cars were racing past on the street, some of them crashing into each other in their panic. He saw a minivan plow into the back of a sedan at full speed, and both vehicles spun across the intersection. Figures emerged from the shadows, dozens of them stumbling toward the wreckage. Within seconds, they swarmed the cars, and Woodrow turned away, unable to watch. We should turn off the outside lights, he said. Make it look like the building's empty. Leroy nodded. Good idea. You and Terrence handle it. Kill everything except the emergency lights inside. Woodrow and Terrence spent the next 20 minutes going through the warehouse, flipping breakers and switches. They turned off the parking lot lights, the loading dock lights, the exterior floods. Inside, they left only the emergency lights running, dim, battery-powered fixtures that cast a faint red glow. The warehouse transformed into a cavern of shadows, and Woodrow felt a primal fear settle over him. Darkness meant danger. Darkness meant you couldn't see what was coming. When they returned to the break room, Leroy had organized the workers into groups. We need to take inventory, he said. Food, water, medical supplies, anything useful. We also need to check every door and window, make sure everything's locked tight. Woodrow volunteered for the security check. He grabbed a flashlight from the maintenance closet and started walking the perimeter of the building. The warehouse had 6 dock doors, 2 personnel doors, and 4 emergency exits. He checked each one, rattling the handles, making sure the locks were engaged. Most were fine, but one of the emergency exits had a bent latch and the door sat slightly ajar. He found a 2x4 in the maintenance area and wedged it against the door, bracing it closed. It wouldn't hold against a serious assault, but it was better than nothing. As he worked, he could hear sounds from outside, distant screams, occasional gunshots, the wail of sirens that gradually faded as the night wore on. The city was tearing itself apart, and they were locked inside this building, cut off and alone. By 4 in the morning, they'd finished the inventory. The warehouse had food, mostly snack bars, chips, and soda from the vending machines, but also several pallets of canned goods waiting to be shipped. Water was more limited, a few cases of bottled water, plus the sinks in the bathrooms. Leroy rationed everything immediately. Each person got 2 bottles of water and 1 meal's worth of food per day. At that rate, they could last maybe a week, assuming nothing went wrong. Medical supplies were minimal. A first aid kit in the office, some bandages, and aspirin in the break room. Nothing that would help if someone got seriously hurt. Weapons were a different story. The warehouse had plenty of tools, crowbars, pipe wrenches, box cutters, hammers. Woodrow gathered a collection and distributed them to the workers. Everyone got something, even if it was just a screwdriver. It made people feel safer, having something in their hands. Leroy took a crowbar and hefted it, testing its weight. Let's hope we don't need these. Yeah, Woodrow said. though he didn't believe it. He'd seen enough already to know that hope was a luxury they couldn't afford. The group settled in to wait. Some people tried to sleep, curling up on the break room couches or stretching out on the warehouse floor with pallets as makeshift beds. Others stayed awake, glued to their phones, refreshing news sites and social media, looking for information. Woodrow couldn't sleep. He sat on a pallet near the windows, watching the street through a gap in the blinds. The cars had stopped coming. The sirens had gone silent. The city was dark now, the power grid failing section by section. Only a few buildings still had lights, islands of brightness in an ocean of black. His phone buzzed with a text from his mama. "I'm okay, baby. Staying inside like you said. You be safe. I love you." Relief flooded through him, so intense it made his hands shake. She was alive. She was safe. He typed back, "Love you too, Mama. Stay inside no matter what. I'll come get you as soon as I can." He meant it. Once this was over, once the authorities got control, once it was safe, he'd drive to Bessemer and bring her back here. Or maybe they'd go somewhere else, somewhere far from Birmingham. He didn't know yet. He just knew he had to reach her. The hours dragged. Dawn came, gray and cold, the light filtering through the dirty windows in thin shafts. Woodrow stood and stretched, his back aching from sitting on the pallet. Around him, the other workers stirred, waking to the same nightmare they'd fallen asleep to. Leroy called everyone together for a meeting. "We need to talk about what happens next," he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes were bloodshot and his hands trembled as he held his clipboard. "This building is safe for now, but we can't stay here forever. Eventually, we'll run out of food and water. We need a plan." "My vote is, we stay put," one of the workers said. "Wait for the military or FEMA or whoever to come help?" "What if they don't come?" Terrence asked. "What if it's just us?" "Then we're fucked," someone else said. "We're not fucked," Leroy said sharply. "We're alive, and we're going to stay that way. But we need to be smart. We need information. Someone needs to go outside, see what's happening, maybe find a working phone or a police station." "I'll go," Woodrow said. The words were out before he could think about them, and everyone turned to look at him. "I'll go," he repeated. "I know the area. I can move fast, stay quiet. And I need to check on my mama anyway. She's in Bessemer." "Bessemer?" Leroy frowned. "That's 30 minutes away. 25 if the roads are clear." Woodrow met his gaze. "I'm going, Leroy." "With or without your blessing?" Leroy studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, but you take someone with you. Terrence, you up for it?" Terrence hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I'll go." "Good." Leroy walked to the tool collection and grabbed 2 crowbars, handing one to each of them. "You see anything dangerous, you run. Don't try to be a hero. Get back here alive with information. That's the mission." Woodrow took the crowbar, feeling its weight in his hand. It was heavy, solid, and the steel was cold against his palm. "We'll be back in a few hours." They geared up in silence. Woodrow grabbed a backpack from the office and filled it with bottled water and granola bars. Terrence did the same. They both wore dark clothing, jeans and hoodies, to blend into the shadows. Woodrow checked his phone. Still no signal, but the battery was at 70%. He pocketed it and zipped up his jacket. Leroy walked them to the personnel door on the east side of the building. "Be careful," he said. "And if things go bad, don't come back." "We'll figure out another plan." Woodrow nodded. Leroy unlocked the door and pushed it open a crack, peering outside. The parking lot was empty, the morning air crisp and cold. He opened the door wider, and Woodrow and Terrence slipped through, moving quickly and quietly across the asphalt. The city was unrecognizable. Cars sat abandoned everywhere, some with doors hanging open, some crashed into light poles or buildings. The streets were littered with debris, clothes, shoes. broken glass, and bodies. So many bodies, sprawled on the sidewalks, in the gutters, some of them torn apart, others just lying still. Woodrow tried not to look too closely, tried not to think about the people those bodies used to be. They moved through the industrial district, sticking to the shadows, avoiding open spaces. The air smelled wrong, smoke and rot and something chemical, sharp and acrid. In the distance, Woodrow could see columns of smoke rising from different parts of the city, black against the gray sky. Terence walked beside him, gripping his crowbar so tight his knuckles were white. "You see any of those things yet?" he whispered. "No," Woodrow said, "but they're out here. Stay alert." They turned a corner and froze. Ahead, in the middle of the street, was one of them, a woman in a nurse's uniform, or what was left of one. She was covered in blood, and her left arm hung at an unnatural angle, broken at the elbow. She was stumbling in circles, moaning softly, and when she turned, Woodrow saw her face. Her jaw was dislocated, hanging loose, and her eyes were empty. "Back up," Woodrow whispered. "Slow." They retreated around the corner, pressing themselves against the wall of a building. Woodrow's heart was pounding, and his breath came in short gasps. The thing hadn't seen them. It was still circling, lost in its own mindless orbit. They took a different route, cutting through an alley and coming out near a gas station. The pumps were smashed, gasoline pooling on the concrete, and the convenience store's windows were shattered. Inside, Woodrow could see more bodies and movement, quick, jerky, inhuman. "Let's keep moving," he said. They pushed forward, crossing streets, ducking behind cars, always watching, always listening. The city was quieter than it should have been. No traffic, no voices, no life. Just the wind, the creak of metal, and the occasional distant scream. After an hour, they reached a residential neighborhood. The houses here were small, single-story, with chain-link fences and patchy lawns. Some had cars in the driveways, others didn't. Most looked abandoned, but a few had signs of life. Curtains drawn tight, doors barricaded with furniture visible through the windows. Woodrow stopped in front of one house with a blue door. "I'm going to knock. See if anyone's home, ask if they have a phone that works." Terence nodded, and they approached the door together. Woodrow knocked softly, then louder when there was no response. "Hello? Anyone in there? We're not sick. We just need help." Silence. Then from inside a voice, male, older, heavy with a southern drawl. "Go away. Sir, please. We just need to use a phone. We won't cause any trouble. I said go away. You come any closer, I'll shoot you through the door." Woodrow stepped back, hands raised. Okay, we're leaving." They moved on, trying 2 more houses with similar results. People were terrified, barricaded inside, unwilling to trust anyone. Woodrow couldn't blame them. By midday, they were exhausted, and the situation was becoming clearer. The outbreak, or whatever this was, had spread fast, faster than anyone could have anticipated. The authorities were gone, or dead, or hiding. There was no help coming, no rescue, just survival. They made their way back to the warehouse, moving carefully, avoiding the things that wandered the streets. Twice they had to hide, crouching behind dumpsters while groups of the infected shuffled past. Once they heard gunshots, close, too close, and they ran, not stopping until they were blocks away. When they finally reached the warehouse, Leroy let them in, his face sagging with relief. "Thank God. We heard the gunshots. Thought you were dead." "Not dead," Woodrow said. "Not yet." He told the group what they'd seen: the bodies, the infected, the empty streets, the barricaded houses. The cell towers were down, the power was out in most areas, and there was no sign of any organized response. "So what do we do?" Donna asked. Her voice was hollow, defeated. "We survive," Leroy said. "We stay here as long as we can, ration our supplies, and wait. Maybe things will get better," but Woodrow knew they wouldn't. He'd seen enough. This wasn't something that was going to blow over. This was the end of the world, happening in real time, and all they could do was try to stay alive one more day. That night, he tried calling his mama again. Still no signal. He sent another text, even though he doubted it would go through. "I'm okay, Mama. Still at work. I'm coming for you. I promise." He didn't know if he could keep that promise. Bessemer was 25 minutes away under normal circumstances, but these weren't normal circumstances. The roads were blocked, the city was overrun, and he had no car. But he'd figure it out. He had to. The next few days blurred together. The group fell into a routine. Watch duty, inventory checks, trying to stay quiet and invisible. They kept the lights off, moved silently, and prayed that nothing outside would notice them. But on the third day, something went wrong. Leroy got sick. It started with a fever. He was shivering during his watch shift, sweating through his shirt, and when Donna checked his temperature with the first aid kit's thermometer, it read 104. "I'm fine," Leroy insisted. "Just a bug. Stress, probably." But Woodrow saw the bite mark on his arm, partially hidden by his sleeve. He grabbed Leroy's wrist and pushed the fabric up, revealing torn flesh, bruised and swollen. "When?" Woodrow demanded. Leroy pulled his arm away. "Yesterday. I went outside to check the dock door, see if it was secure. One of those things grabbed me through the gap. I fought it off, thought I'd cleaned it good enough, but—" "You're infected," someone said. The words hung in the air, and the room went silent. Leroy looked at the faces around him, saw the fear, the revulsion. Maybe not. Maybe it's just an infection, like bacteria. "You need to leave," Donna said, her voice shaking. "You need to go outside. Now." "Donna, now!" She was crying, hysterical. "You'll turn into one of those things and you'll kill us all." Leroy looked at Woodrow, pleading. "Woodrow, please." Woodrow felt his chest tighten. Leroy had been fair to him, had treated him with respect, had tried to keep everyone safe. But if he was infected, if he turned, they were all dead. "I'm sorry," Woodrow said quietly. "But she's right. You have to go." Leroy's face crumpled, and for a moment he looked like he might argue. But then he nodded, accepting his fate. Okay, I'll go. Just give me a weapon. Don't make me go out there with nothing." Woodrow handed him a crowbar and a flashlight. Leroy took them, his hands shaking, and walked to the door. He paused at the threshold, looking back at the group. "Take care of each other," he said, "and don't give up. Don't ever give up." Then he stepped outside, and Woodrow locked the door behind him. They heard him for a while, his footsteps on the pavement receding into the distance. Then silence. Woodrow leaned his forehead against the door, his eyes closed. He'd just condemned a man to death, and it felt like a piece of his soul had been ripped away, but he didn't have time to mourn. Because an hour later, Leroy came back. The pounding on the door started around midnight, heavy, rhythmic, relentless. Woodrow was on watch, sitting near the break room with a flashlight and a crowbar. At first he thought it was one of the infected from outside, but then he heard Leroy's voice. "Let me in! Please, I'm still me! I'm still human!" Woodrow ran to the door, pressed his ear against the metal. "Leroy? Woodrow, please." The fever broke. "I'm okay. I'm not turning. Please just let me in. I'm cold. I'm scared." The voice sounded like Leroy. Same tone, same accent, but there was something off about it. Something flat and empty, like he was reading from a script. "Leroy, I can't. I'm sorry. Woodrow, open the door." The voice was colder now, harder. "Open the door or I'll break it down." The pounding intensified, and Woodrow heard the metal groan. He backed away, his pulse racing. The other workers appeared, woken by the noise, and they stood in a semicircle, staring at the door. "Is that Leroy?" Terrence asked. "It was," Woodrow said. The pounding continued for hours, occasionally stopping, then starting again. Leroy's voice cycled through emotions, pleading, angry, calm, desperate. But the undertone was always the same: dead, empty, wrong. Eventually the pounding stopped. They waited, holding their breath, and then they heard footsteps receding into the night. Leroy was gone, but the damage was done. The group was on edge now, paranoid. People eyed each other suspiciously, looking for signs of fever, of bites, of infection. Trust eroded, replaced by fear. On the 5th day, they ran out of bottled water. The warehouse bathroom sinks still worked, but the water that came out was brown and foul-smelling. They boiled it on a makeshift stove, a metal drum filled with scrap wood, but nobody knew if that was enough to make it safe. On the 6th day, Donna hanged herself. She used a belt tied to a rafter in the warehouse ceiling and did it during the night shift when nobody was watching. Terrence found her in the morning, swaying gently in the dim red light of the emergency lamps. They buried her outside in a shallow grave next to the loading dock. Woodrow said a few words, he didn't know what else to do, and they covered her with dirt and rocks. It felt inadequate, insufficient, but it was all they had. By the end of the first week, there were only 12 of them left. The others had either left, hoping to find better shelter, or they'd gotten sick, or they'd just given up. The warehouse felt larger now, emptier, like a tomb. Woodrow knew he couldn't stay any longer. His mama was out there, alone in Bessemer, and he'd promised to come for her. He'd been a coward, hiding in the warehouse, convincing himself he was staying for the group. But the group was falling apart, and every day he waited was another day his mama was in danger. He told Terrence his plan. "I'm leaving tomorrow, going to Bessemer." Terrence looked at him like he was insane. "Man, you won't make it 10 miles. "Maybe not. But I have to try." "You got a car?" "No. I'll walk if I have to." "That's 30 miles, Woodrow. Through a city full of those things. You'll die." "Then I'll die," Woodrow said simply. "But I'm not staying here." Terrence was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "I'll come with you. At least part of the way. I got family too, over in Irondale. Been thinking about them." They left before dawn, while the others were still asleep. Woodrow wrote a note for the group, explaining where they'd gone, wishing them luck. He didn't know if anyone would read it, or if it mattered. The warehouse was a temporary solution to a permanent problem. They packed light, water, food, crowbars, flashlights. Woodrow strapped a backpack over his shoulders and checked his phone one last time. Still no signal, but the battery was at 40%. He pocketed it and followed Terrence out into the cold morning air. The city was worse now. The bodies had started to decay, filling the air with a stench that made Woodrow gag. Flies swarmed in thick clouds, and rats scurried through the streets, fat and bold. The infected were everywhere, wandering aimlessly or clustering around sources of sound. Woodrow and Terrence moved slowly, carefully, avoiding contact. They made it to Irondale by midday. Terrence's family lived in a small house on a quiet street, and when they arrived, the front door was open, swinging in the wind. Inside, they found Terrence's mother and sister, both dead, both torn apart. Terrence fell to his knees sobbing, and Woodrow stood guard, watching the street while his friend grieved. After an hour, Terrence stood. His face was blank, his eyes red and swollen. "I'm done," he said quietly. "I got nothing left." "Come with me," Woodrow said. "We'll go to Bessemer. You can stay with me and my mama." "Nah." Terrence shook his head. "I'm staying here. With them." "Terrence, go, Woodrow. Find your mama. Live. I'm done." Woodrow wanted to argue, but he could see the resolve in Terrence's eyes. He wasn't going to change his mind. "Okay," Woodrow said. "Okay, I'm sorry, man." Terrence nodded, and Woodrow left him there, standing in the doorway of his dead family's house. Alone now, Woodrow pushed west toward Bessemer. The highway was a nightmare, a graveyard of cars and bodies stretching for miles. He climbed over wrecks, squeezed through gaps, always moving, always watching. The infected were thick here, drawn by the chaos of the initial evacuation. He had to fight twice, swinging his crowbar, caving in skulls, feeling the sickening crunch of bone and brain matter. Each time he was slower, more tired, more afraid. By the time he reached I-20, the sun was setting and his body was screaming. His legs ached, his shoulders burned, and his hands were blistered from gripping the crowbar. He'd been walking for over 10 hours, and he'd covered maybe 15 miles. Bessemer was still 10 miles away, and darkness was falling fast. He tried calling his mama again. Still nothing. He sent another text. "Almost there, Mama. Hold on." The highway stretched out before him, a river of metal and glass, and he started walking. It was full dark when they found him. He was near the exit for Bessemer, so close he could see the lights of the town in the distance. Faint, flickering but there, when the infected closed in. They came from everywhere, spilling out from the wrecked cars, emerging from the shadows under the overpass, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They moved as one, drawn by the sound of his footsteps, the smell of his sweat, the heat of his living body. Woodrow ran. He dropped his backpack, dropped everything except the crowbar and his phone, and he ran faster than he'd ever run in his life. But they were everywhere, cutting off every escape route, surrounding him in a tightening circle. He swung the crowbar, felt it connect with flesh and bone, but there were too many. Far too many. He backed against a concrete barrier, gasping for air, and pulled out his phone. By some miracle, he had one bar of signal, just one. He dialed his mama's number, and it rang, once, twice, 3 times. "Hello?" Her voice was tired, scared, but alive, and Woodrow felt tears streaming down his face. "Mama," he gasped. "Mama, it's me." "Baby? Baby, where are you? I've been trying to call you for days." "I'm on I-20, Mama. I tried to get to you, I tried, but—" His voice broke and he sobbed. "I tried. Oh, baby, oh no. Where are you?" The infected were closing in, their hands reaching for him, their mouths opening. Woodrow swung the crowbar one last time, connecting with a skull, then another, but they kept coming. He pressed his back against the barrier, the phone clutched to his ear, and closed his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mama. I'm so sorry." "Don't say that. Don't you dare say that. You listen to me, baby. You fight. You hear me? You fight and you get yourself safe and you call me back. You call me back, Woodrow." "I love you, Mama," he whispered. "I love you too, baby. I love you so much." The first one grabbed his arm, its teeth sinking into his flesh, and he screamed. The phone fell from his hand, clattering against the concrete. He could hear his mama's voice, distant and tinny, calling his name over and over. "Woodrow? Woodrow? Baby, talk to me! Woodrow!" The infected pulled him down, and he disappeared beneath them, their weight crushing the air from his lungs. The crowbar slipped from his fingers, and his vision dimmed, the edges going black. The last thing he heard was his mama's voice, still calling for him, still asking when he was coming to visit, as the darkness swallowed him whole and the world went silent. Now let's move on to the next story. Clyde's hand shot out with shocking speed, grabbing the edge of the service window frame. His fingers dug into the aluminum, bending it with impossible strength. Leroy stumbled back, his hip hitting the counter, and Clyde's face pressed against the window screen, his mouth opening wide, revealing teeth stained with something dark that wasn't food. The sound that came from Clyde's throat was worse than anything Leroy had ever heard, a wet, rattling growl that echoed in the confined space of the truck. Behind him, more screaming. The chaos on the street was spreading, people running in all directions, and through the window Leroy could see the man in the suit had released the woman and was now chasing someone else, his movements stilted but fast. driven by something beyond reason or pain. Clyde's hand clawed at the screen, tearing through the metal mesh. His other hand followed, both arms now reaching through the window, grasping for Leroy. The smell that came off him was overwhelming. Sweat and something else, something rotten, like meat gone bad in the summer heat. Leroy's survival instinct kicked in before his conscious mind caught up. His hand found the long, serrated knife on the counter, the one he used for slicing the brisket. He swung it without thinking, aiming for Clyde's reaching arms. The blade bit into flesh, cut deep, but Clyde didn't pull back. He didn't even seem to feel it. Blood ran from the wound, dark and thick, splattering onto the counter and floor. "Clyde, stop!" Leroy shouted, but the man's eyes were empty, completely vacant. Whatever Clyde had been was gone. This was something else wearing his body. The hands got closer, fingers splayed and grasping. Leroy swung again, harder this time, the knife cutting across Clyde's forearm. Bone showed white through the wound. Still no reaction beyond that horrible growling sound. The propane burner was still on, the griddle glowing hot. Leroy grabbed the spatula with his free hand and swung the flat metal surface into Clyde's face. The hot metal sizzled against skin, the smell of burning flesh mixing with everything else. Clyde's head jerked back, but his hands kept reaching, kept grasping. Behind Leroy, the back door of the truck was locked with a simple deadbolt. He could run, get out, but where would he go? The street outside was chaos, people running and screaming, and he could see more of them now. More people moving wrong, attacking others, their movements jerky and aggressive. Clyde's torso was halfway through the window now, his weight pulling him forward. The window frame groaned under the pressure. Leroy made a decision he'd question later if he survived long enough for later to matter. He dropped the spatula, grabbed the cleaver from the magnetic strip on the wall, and brought it down on Clyde's neck with all his strength. The blade cut deep, through muscle and windpipe, but not all the way through. Blood erupted from the wound, spraying across the service window, the counter, Leroy's shirt and face. The taste of it hit his tongue, copper and salt, and he gagged even as he pulled the cleaver free and swung again. The second blow severed something critical. Clyde's body went limp, his arms falling away from the window frame. The massive weight slid down, disappearing from view, leaving only the blood and the destroyed window screen behind. Leroy stood frozen, the cleaver still gripped in both hands, blood dripping from the blade to pool on the floor. His breath came in ragged gasps. His hands shook so badly he almost dropped the weapon. What had he just done? He'd killed Clyde. Clyde, who came by 3 times a week, who always left a $2 tip, who'd helped him push the truck when it stalled last winter. Except that hadn't been Clyde. Not at the end. That had been something else. The screaming outside intensified. Leroy forced himself to move, to step around the blood and look through the window. What he saw made his stomach clench with primitive fear. The street had become a massacre. Bodies lay on the pavement, some still moving, some not. The woman in the blue dress was on her knees, blood soaking her clothing, and even as Leroy watched, she convulsed, her body seizing. The man in the suit who'd attacked her was further down the block, tearing into someone else. And there were others, at least a dozen people moving through the chaos, attacking anyone they could reach, their movements that same wrong jerky pattern, their sounds inhuman. A police car turned onto the street, siren wailing. It screeched to a stop and 2 officers jumped out, weapons drawn. They were shouting commands, but the attackers didn't respond, just kept advancing. The officers fired. The gunshots were shockingly loud, echoing off the buildings. One of the attackers, a woman in a postal uniform, jerked as bullets hit her chest, but she kept coming. The officer fired again, aiming for her head this time. The top of her skull exploded in a spray of blood and brain matter, and finally she dropped. Leroy's phone was buzzing in his pocket. He pulled it out with shaking hands, saw his brother's name on the screen. He answered, "Leroy, what the hell is happening?" His brother's voice was tight with panic. "The news is saying there's some kind of outbreak downtown, that people are attacking each other." "It's real," Leroy said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, flat and distant. "I'm watching it happen. Clyde tried to... He came at me, I had to..." "Where are you?" "The truck. Capitol Street. You need to get out of there, get somewhere safe." "Safe? Where?" Leroy looked around the interior of the truck. Blood everywhere. Clyde's body somewhere outside the window. "What's safe? Come to Pearl. Come to my apartment. We'll figure this out." Pearl. 15 minutes away normally, but the streets were chaos. More gunshots outside, more screaming. The sound of breaking glass. "I'll try," Leroy said. "Just stay inside. Lock your doors." "Leroy, I'll get there, I promise." He ended the call, shoved the phone back in his pocket. The radio in the truck was still on. The DJ's voice now urgent. Professional calm replaced by something closer to fear. "We're receiving reports of violent incidents across the greater Jackson area. Authorities are advising people to stay in their homes and avoid contact with anyone exhibiting aggressive behavior or signs of illness. The National Guard has been activated. This is not a drill. Not a drill." The words seemed absurd given what Leroy could see outside. This wasn't an exercise or a scare. People were dying. People were changing into those things. He looked down at the cleaver in his hand, still dripping blood. The long knife was on the counter, equally blood-stained. His food truck had become a crime scene, or a war zone, or something worse. But it also held supplies. Water bottles in the cooler, food enough for a few days if he rationed, and more importantly, a collection of knives and tools he knew how to use. The back door. He could go out the back, try to reach his car parked in the alley behind the truck. If he could get to the car, he could drive to Pearl, get to his brother. Simple plan. Direct. Leroy grabbed a canvas bag from under the counter, started throwing things into it. Water bottles, 3 of them. A package of beef jerky from his personal stash. The knife and the cleaver, wrapped in a towel to keep them from cutting through the bag. His phone charger, a lighter, a roll of duct tape, always useful. His construction experience had taught him that. Movement outside the front window made him freeze. Another one of those things was approaching, this one a teenager in a high school letter jacket. The boy's face was pallid, dark veins showing through translucent skin, his mouth opening and closing mechanically. He was sniffing the air like a dog, his head moving from side to side. Following the smell of blood, Leroy realized, all this blood was drawing them. He moved as quietly as possible toward the back door, the bag slung over his shoulder, the cleaver gripped in his right hand. The deadbolt slid back with a soft click. He eased the door open, wincing at the creak of hinges that needed oil. The alley behind the truck was narrow, lined with dumpsters and loading docks. His car was parked 30 feet away, a beat-up Honda Civic with 200,000 miles on it. The distance looked impossibly far. Leroy stepped down from the truck, his work boots hitting the asphalt with a soft thud. The sounds from the street were louder out here. Screaming, shouting, breaking glass, more gunshots in the distance. Smoke was rising from somewhere to the north, a black column against the blue sky. He started toward the car, keeping close to the wall, trying to stay quiet. 20 feet. 15. His keys were in his pocket. He fished them out, held them ready, careful not to let them jingle. A door slammed open ahead, one of the loading dock entrances. A man stumbled out, backing away from something inside. He was bleeding from his arm, clutching the wound with his other hand. His face, a mask of terror. Behind him, 2 of those things emerged from the doorway, moving with that distinctive jerky gait. The injured man saw Leroy, his eyes desperate. "Help me!" "Please." The 2 attackers turned at the sound of his voice, their heads swiveling in Leroy's direction. For a frozen second, everyone was still. Then the things charged. Leroy ran. The car keys were in his hand, but he knew he wouldn't make it, knew they were too close. He veered left instead into a narrow gap between two dumpsters, hoping his smaller size would give him an advantage. The things followed, their movements hampered by the tight space but not stopped. Their hands reached for him, grabbed at his shirt. He swung the cleaver blindly, felt it connect with something, heard a wet sound of impact. He squeezed through the gap and came out the other side, found himself in a small loading area behind a restaurant. A fire escape ladder hung just above head height. Leroy jumped, caught the lowest rung, pulled himself up with strength born of pure terror. His shoulders screamed with the effort. 7 years of lifting cookware and propane tanks had built muscle he was grateful for now. The things below couldn't follow, couldn't figure out the ladder. They reached up with grasping hands, making those horrible, wet, growling sounds, but Leroy was above them, climbing higher. The metal rungs were hot from the sun, burning his palms, but he kept going until he reached the first landing. He looked down. The injured man who'd called for help was on the ground, the two things kneeling over him, tearing at his flesh with their teeth and hands. Blood pooled around them, spreading across the asphalt. The man's screaming had stopped. Leroy turned away, pressed his forehead against the hot brick of the building, fought the urge to vomit. His brother. He had to get to his brother in Pearl. But his car was down there, and the alley was full of those things now, more of them emerging from doorways and side streets, drawn by the noise and the blood. Going back down wasn't an option. Leroy forced himself to think. The fire escape went all the way to the roof. From the roof, he might be able to see more of the city, figure out a route, or maybe there was a way across the buildings, roof to roof, away from the street-level chaos. He climbed. The metal stairs clanged under his boots, loud in the afternoon heat. At the top, he pushed through a roof access door that was unlocked, thank God for building code violations, and emerged onto a flat commercial roof covered in heat-softened tar paper. The view stole his breath. Jackson was burning. Not everywhere, not yet, but fires had started in multiple locations, north toward UMMC, west toward the residential areas, south near the train depot. Smoke columns rose into the still air. From this height, Leroy could see the streets, see the chaos spreading through them. Cars were gridlocked, some crashed into each other, some abandoned. People were running. And those things were everywhere, hunting, attacking, spreading whatever infection had caused this nightmare. A helicopter passed overhead, military from the look of it, heading toward the Capitol building. The sound of its rotors was briefly louder than everything else, then it was gone, swallowed by the distance. Leroy pulled out his phone, checked the time. 12:45. Less than an hour since Clyde had approached the truck window. 1 hour for the world to end. He tried calling his brother. The call wouldn't connect, just a fast, busy signal. The cell network was overloaded, everyone trying to reach everyone else. He tried again. Same result. He sent a text instead. Can't get to car. Streets blocked. Trying to find another way. Stay inside. Lock everything. Don't let anyone in. The text went from sending to sent after a 30-second delay. No immediate response. Maybe his brother's phone was having the same connection issues. Leroy looked at the neighboring buildings. The one to the east was slightly lower, maybe a 6-foot drop, with a gap of about 8 feet between the roofs. Jumpable if he was desperate enough. Beyond that, more buildings, creating a possible route east toward Pearl. It would be slower than driving, more dangerous, but the streets were impassable. Or he could stay here, on the roof, wait for help. The National Guard was activated, the DJ had said. The military would contain this. They had to. Except the fires were spreading, and the number of those things was increasing, and every person they attacked became one of them. Leroy was sure of it now. He'd seen the woman in the blue dress convulsing after being bitten, seen her transformation begin. This wasn't just random violence. This was an infection, spreading exponentially. His phone buzzed, text from his brother. News says infection spreading fast. Research facility lockdown failed. They're evacuating UMMC. Where are you? Leroy typed, Capitol Street roof. Going to try to head east over buildings toward you. Don't know how long it will take. The response came quickly. Be careful. People getting desperate. Saw someone get shot trying to break into a house. Shot by another survivor. The realization settled heavy in Leroy's gut. The infected weren't the only danger. People defending their homes, their families, their supplies. They'd kill to protect what was theirs. He would too, probably, if someone threatened his brother. Another text, love you, man. Get here safe. Love you too, Leroy typed back. Going dark to save battery. Text if emergency only. He turned off the screen, pocketed the phone. The sun was directly overhead now, the heat brutal. Sweat soaked through his shirt, mixing with the blood already there. Clyde's blood. He looked down at himself, saw he was covered in it, his jeans dark with it, his hands stained red-brown. The canvas bag held his supplies. The cleaver was his weapon. His boots were solid, good for moving across uncertain terrain. His knowledge of the city was decent. 7 years of driving to and from the food truck spots had given him a mental map of Jackson's layout. East to Pearl, 15 minutes by car, hours by rooftop, if he was lucky. Days if he had to detour around impassable areas. But it was the only plan he had. Leroy walked to the edge of the roof, judged the distance to the next building. 8 feet, maybe 9. The drop was manageable. He backed up 20 feet, took a breath, ran. His boots hit the edge and he pushed off, sailing through the air for a brief, terrifying moment, then landing hard on the neighboring roof. He rolled, the way he'd learned falling off bikes as a kid, came up with scraped palms and a jarred shoulder, but nothing broken. He stood, looked back at the restaurant roof, then forward to the next building, and the next. A path through the air, above the death filling the streets. He started walking. The next 3 buildings were easier, the gaps narrower, the heights more level. Leroy moved as quickly as he dared, testing each section of roof before putting his full weight on it, avoiding the obvious weak spots where the tar paper was torn or the underlying structure looked damaged. Some of these buildings were old, poorly maintained, and a fall through a rotten roof would end his journey as effectively as one of those things. On the 5th building, a 4-story office complex, he found a roof access door that was chained shut from the inside. He could hear sounds below, voices, someone crying, a radio playing too loud, survivors barricaded inside. He thought about knocking, asking for help or shelter, but the memory of his brother's text stopped him. People getting shot for trying to break in. Better to keep moving, stay unseen. The city sounds were changing as the afternoon wore on. Fewer screams now, which could mean fewer people left to scream. More of those wet, growling sounds echoing from the streets. Occasional gunfire, sometimes single shots, sometimes sustained bursts that spoke of serious resistance. Once, a massive explosion somewhere to the south that shook the building under Leroy's feet made him grab a vent pipe for balance. He checked his phone at 3:30. A text from his brother, sent 10 minutes ago. Hearing reports they're evacuating people to highway patrol stations. You see any evacuation routes? Leroy looked around from his current position atop a furniture warehouse. He could see I-55 in the distance, the highway that connected Jackson to Pearl. It was a parking lot, cars gridlocked in both directions. Even if he got down to street level, even if he found a working vehicle, that highway wasn't an option. He texted back, I-55 blocked, still moving east on foot, slow going. How are you? The response took 5 minutes. Scared. Got food and water for a week if I ration. Doors and windows barricaded. Saw one of those things in the parking lot. It didn't see me. Be safe. Leroy wanted to write more, to say something comforting, but he didn't know what that would be. The world was ending, and they both knew it. Comforting words seemed pointless. He kept moving. By sunset, he'd covered maybe 2 miles, a journey that should have taken 5 minutes by car. His legs ached from jumping and climbing, his hands were raw from grabbing hot metal and rough concrete, and the canvas bag kept banging against his hip, the supplies inside shifting with each movement. He'd had to backtrack twice when roof gaps proved too wide or buildings ended without connection to the next section. He was somewhere near Lynch Street now, he thought, based on the landmarks he could see. Pearl was still at least 5 miles away, assuming a direct route, which was impossible given the building layout. He'd need to descend eventually, try to cross streets, maybe find a car with keys still in it. The sun was low on the horizon, painting the smoke columns orange and red. Beautiful in a terrible way. Leroy found a spot on a warehouse roof that was sheltered by a raised section, sat down with his back against the wall, let himself rest for the first time since this morning. This morning. It felt like years ago. The routine of opening the truck, prepping the food, the normalcy of taking orders and making change. Clyde approaching the window, everything that came after. Leroy pulled out a water bottle, allowed himself 3 careful swallows. The water was warm, tasted like plastic, but it helped. He was hungry but decided to save the food for later. He had no idea how long this would take, how long he'd need to make these supplies last. His phone showed 15% battery, 3 missed calls from a number he didn't recognize, probably someone from the lunch line trying to reach anyone who might be alive. He deleted them to save space, kept only the text thread with his brother. As darkness fell, the city changed again. The sounds grew louder, more concentrated. Those things hunted better in the darkness, maybe. Or maybe the people who'd survived the day were making desperate moves to find shelter. Leroy heard breaking glass, shouts, someone screaming for help. The screaming cut off abruptly. He tried not to think about what that meant. The temperature dropped, but it was still warm, the concrete radiating the day's stored heat. Leroy pulled the bloody towel from his bag, used a corner of it that wasn't too stained to wipe his face and hands. The blood had dried to a dark crust on his skin, itched terribly. He wanted a shower, wanted to wash away the physical memory of what he'd done, but mostly he wanted to be with his brother, in that apartment in Pearl, safe behind barricaded doors. He allowed himself to doze, but not to sleep. Every sound jerked him alert. Footsteps on gravel, the creak of a door, distant shouts. Twice he heard something on the roof with him, scraping sounds that could have been an animal or one of those things figuring out how to climb. He gripped the cleaver and waited in the darkness until the sounds moved away. Around midnight, the power went out. The city lights that had still been burning, street lights, building security lights, apartment windows, all died at once. Jackson went dark except for the fires, which had grown larger and more numerous. The glow from them lit the underside of the smoke clouds, turning the night sky a sickly orange. No power meant no water pumps, no refrigeration, no phones charging. How long would the cell towers keep working? A day? 2? Leroy's phone was down to 8%. He turned it completely off to preserve what battery remained. The darkness was complete without the screen light. Leroy sat with his back against the wall, the cleaver across his lap, and listened to the city die. Dawn came slowly, the sun struggling through the smoke haze. Leroy woke from a half-sleep with his neck stiff and his mouth tasting like old pennies. His muscles screamed when he stood, his back protesting the night spent on concrete. He was 42 years old and felt twice that. The canvas bag had a bottle and a half of water left. The beef jerky, the knives, his lighter and duct tape, not much to survive on, but it would have to do. He started moving again as soon as the light was strong enough to see. The route took him north for a block to find a building low enough to access street level, then back east once he was down. The street was littered with debris, abandoned cars, broken glass, trash, bodies. Leroy tried not to look at the bodies, but it was impossible to avoid them completely. Some were torn apart, partially eaten. Others looked intact except for the bite marks, and those were the ones that worried him because they could reanimate. He'd seen enough yesterday to know the pattern. A pharmacy on the corner looked like it had been looted, the windows smashed, the interior ransacked. Leroy approached carefully, cleaver ready, but the place was empty. He went inside anyway, searched through the chaos for anything useful. Most of the shelves were bare, but he found a bottle of ibuprofen that had rolled under a display rack, a box of bandages, and a small flashlight that still worked. He added them to his bag. Outside again, he moved quickly across an intersection, very aware of how exposed he was. Open streets were killing zones. He could hear movement nearby, shuffling footsteps, that distinctive wet growl. He ducked into an alley, pressed himself against a wall, waited. 3 of them passed the alley entrance, 2 men and a woman, all in various states of decay. The smell hit him even from 20 feet away. Rotting meat, human waste, something chemical and sharp. They moved without coordination, bumping into each other, but they moved with purpose, hunting. When they were gone, Leroy continued east. He found a bicycle outside a convenience store, the chain broken but otherwise intact. He could fix the chain if he had tools, but he had nothing. He kept walking. The sun climbed higher. The heat returned. Leroy's shirt was stiff with dried blood and sweat, and he knew he must reek, must smell like death himself. Maybe that was good. Maybe it masked his living scent from those things. Around 9 in the morning, he heard an engine, a vehicle, approaching from behind. Leroy turned, saw a pickup truck rumbling down the street, weaving around the abandoned cars. 2 people in the cab, at least 3 more in the bed, all of them armed with rifles and shotguns. The truck slowed as it approached. Leroy raised his hand in what he hoped was a non-threatening gesture. The passenger window rolled down, a man in his 50s leaning out. "You bit?" the man asked. "No." "Clean. Where you headed?" "East, trying to get to Pearl." "Ain't nothing in Pearl but dead folks in those things. Better come with us. We're heading south, out to the country. Got a place set up, safe." Leroy hesitated. A group meant resources, protection, better chances. But Pearl meant his brother. "My brother's in Pearl," he said. "I need to get to him." The man in the truck shrugged. "Your funeral. But if you're smart, you'll forget about Pearl and come with us." "I appreciate the offer. Suit yourself." The window rolled up and the truck accelerated, its engine loud in the empty street. Leroy watched it go, wondered if he'd just made a fatal mistake, but he kept walking east. The city changed as he moved through it. Some areas looked almost normal, just empty, as if everyone had simply left. Other areas were war zones, buildings on fire, cars overturned, bodies everywhere. The infection had spread unevenly, clusters of chaos separated by pockets of eerie quiet. In one of the quiet areas, a residential neighborhood of small houses with chain-link fences, Leroy found a garden hose still connected to an outside spigot. He tried the tap, hoping against hope, and water trickled out. Weak pressure, barely more than a dribble, but it was water. He drank, then used the rest to wash his face and hands, scrubbing at the dried blood until his skin felt raw. The house behind the fence looked intact. No broken windows, the door closed. Leroy thought about knocking, about asking for help, but he remembered the text from his brother, people getting shot. He walked away instead. By noon, he'd reached Highway 80, which ran east-west through Jackson. Pearl was just on the other side, maybe 3 miles further. So close. But the highway was a barrier. 6 lanes of gridlocked traffic. The cars packed so tight there was barely room to walk between them. Leroy started threading his way through, moving from car to car. Some were empty, doors open, keys still in the ignition. Others contained bodies, people who'd died trying to escape, or people who'd turned into those things while trapped in their vehicles. He gave those cars wide berth. Halfway across, he heard crying, a child's voice, weak and desperate. Leroy stopped, tried to locate the source. A minivan 3 cars ahead, the side door slightly open. He approached carefully. "Hello?" The crying stopped. A small face appeared in the gap. A girl, maybe 7 or 8, her face streaked with tears and dirt. "Are you okay?" Leroy asked. "My mom's sick," the girl said. "She won't wake up." Leroy's stomach dropped. He knew what sick meant now. "Honey, you need to come out of there. Come out and we'll find help." "I can't leave her." "Yes, you can. You have to." A sound from inside the van. Movement. Then a woman's face appeared behind the girl, pale and wrong, eyes vacant. The woman's hand reached for the girl's shoulder. "Run!" Leroy shouted. The girl screamed as her mother's fingers closed on her arm, pulling her back into the van. Leroy lunged forward, grabbed the girl's other arm, pulled hard. The mother, the thing that had been her mother, held on, her grip bruising tight. The girl was screaming, being pulled in 2 directions. Leroy let go with one hand, grabbed the cleaver from his belt, swung it at the mother's arm. The blade bit deep, severed muscle and tendons. The grip loosened and Leroy yanked the girl free, pulled her out of the van, shoved her behind him. The mother thing came through the open door, mouth wide, reaching. Leroy swung the cleaver again, this time at the neck. The blade stuck in the spine, wedged there. He pulled but couldn't free it. The mother thing kept coming, arms outstretched, making that horrible growling sound. Leroy abandoned the cleaver, grabbed the girl's hand, ran. They weaved between cars, the girl sobbing and stumbling. Behind them, the mother thing followed, dragging the cleaver still embedded in her neck, leaving a trail of black blood. They made it to the far side of the highway, put 50 yards between them and their pursuer, before the mother thing lost interest and wandered off in another direction. Leroy stopped, bent over with his hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. His chest hurt. His heart was hammering. The girl stood beside him, crying silently now, her thin body shaking. She was wearing a pink dress that had been clean once, white sneakers with cartoon characters on them. Just a kid caught in a nightmare. "What's your name?" Leroy asked when he could breathe again. "Emma," she whispered. "Emma, I'm Leroy. We need to keep moving. It's not safe here." "Where's my mom?" How did he answer that? The truth would break her. A lie would give false hope. "Your mom's gone, honey. I'm sorry, but we need to get somewhere safe." "Where?" Good question. His brother's apartment was meant for one person hiding from the infected, not a man and a traumatized child. But what choice did he have? Leave her here? She'd die within hours. "I'm going to Pearl," he said, "to my brother's place. You can come with me." She nodded, not because she understood or agreed, but because she had no other option. Leroy took her hand and they started walking. The loss of the cleaver hurt. It had been his primary weapon, familiar and effective. He still had the long, serrated knife, but it would require closer combat, more risk. He'd need to find something else, another tool to keep distance between himself and the infected. They moved through a strip mall parking lot, past a burned-out grocery store and a dollar store with its windows smashed. Emma walked beside him silently, her hand small and cold in his despite the heat. He wanted to comfort her, to say something that would make this less terrible, but there was nothing to say. At the edge of the parking lot, they found a sporting goods store. The front was secured with metal gates, but the back-loading door had been forced open. Leroy hesitated. Looters could still be inside, or worse, but he needed a weapon. "Stay close to me," he told Emma. "If I say run, you run. Understand?" She nodded. They went in through the loading door, entering a dark storage room filled with boxes. Leroy pulled out the flashlight he'd found at the pharmacy, used its weak beam to navigate through the space. The store beyond was chaos. Shelves overturned, merchandise scattered, the cash registers smashed open and empty. But in the camping section, he found what he needed. A compound bow, still in its box, unnoticed by the looters who'd grabbed the guns and ammunition. He ripped open the box, pulled out the bow. It was already assembled, set to a 50-pound draw weight, manageable if he was careful. A dozen arrows were in a separate package. Not much, but infinitely better than nothing. He tested the draw. His construction worker arms handled it fine, though he'd never fired a bow before in his life. How hard could it be? Point, pull, release. They left the store with the bow, the arrows in a quiver he'd found, and a hunting knife in a sheath that he clipped to his belt. Emma was carrying a small backpack he'd grabbed, filled with energy bars from the camping section and 2 bottles of sports drink. It wasn't much, but it added to their supplies. Pearl was close now, just a mile or so. They moved through residential streets, keeping to the edges, using parked cars and fences for cover. The sun was past its peak, the afternoon heat still brutal. Emma was lagging, her small legs struggling to keep pace. Leroy slowed, matched her speed. They had time. Better to be careful than fast. On a street corner, they found a body. A man in National Guard uniform, his rifle still clutched in one hand. He'd been attacked from behind, his neck torn open. The rifle was an M4, military grade. Leroy checked it, still loaded, safety on, ready to fire. He took it, slung it over his shoulder. Now he had reach and stopping power. The weight of the weapon was reassuring, substantial. They kept walking. His brother's apartment complex came into view around 4 in the afternoon. A 2-story building, 12 units, set back from the road behind a small parking lot. Most of the cars were still there, which could mean survivors, or could mean the infected had trapped people inside. No way to know without getting closer. Leroy pulled out his phone, powered it on. 3% battery. He sent a text. "Outside your building. Let me know if safe to approach." The phone died before he got a response. "Shit," he muttered, then caught himself. Emma didn't need to hear him curse. "Stay here," he told her, pointing to a spot behind a dumpster. "Don't move unless I call for you." She nodded, crouched down, made herself small. Good survival instinct. Leroy approached the building with the rifle ready, scanning the windows and doors for movement. His brother's apartment was on the 2nd floor, southwest corner. The windows were covered with blankets from the inside, same as several other units. People hiding, trying to stay unseen. A door on the ground floor opened a crack. Leroy swung the rifle toward it, finger on the trigger. "Don't shoot!" A woman's voice, scared but controlled. "Are you infected?" "No." "Looking for my brother. He's in 2B. There's people in 2B. They're alive as of this morning. Haven't heard from them since." "Can I get up there?" "Stairs on the east side. But there's one of those things on the 2nd floor landing. Been there all day. We can't get it out." Leroy looked at the east stairwell. External stairs, concrete and metal, leading up to the 2nd floor landing. He couldn't see the landing from here, but if there was one of those things waiting, he'd need to deal with it. "Okay, thank you." The door closed. Leroy went back to Emma. "Come on, we're almost there." They approached the stairwell together. Leroy could smell it before he saw it. That rot smell, unmistakable. He motioned for Emma to stay at the bottom, then started up the stairs with the rifle raised. The thing was at the top landing, standing in front of one of the apartment doors, just standing there like it was waiting for someone to open up. It had been a young man once, college age maybe, wearing a Pearl High School football jersey. Now it was something else, skin gray and mottled, eyes filmy and dead. It turned when Leroy reached the top of the stairs. its head moving in that jerky way they all had. The mouth opened, revealing brown teeth. The sound started in its chest, that wet growl. Leroy had never fired a rifle before today, had never fired any gun, actually, but the basics were obvious. Aim, breathe, squeeze. He pointed the rifle at the thing's head from 10 feet away, took a breath, squeezed the trigger. The recoil surprised him, the rifle kicking hard against his shoulder. The shot went wide, punched through the wall behind the thing. The creature charged. Leroy fired again, this time braced for the kick. The shot hit center mass, knocked the thing backward a step, but didn't stop it. He fired a third time, aiming higher, and this time the bullet caught it in the jaw, destroyed the lower half of its face. Still it came, hands reaching. The fourth shot took the top of its head off. It dropped like a puppet with cut strings, fell forward at Leroy's feet. Blood, dark and thick, pooled on the concrete. His ears rang from the gunshots. He stood there for a moment, the rifle still raised, making sure the thing wasn't getting back up. When it didn't move after 30 seconds, he lowered the weapon. "Emma, come up, it's okay." She climbed the stairs, stepping carefully over the body, not looking at it. Smart kid. His brother's door was number 2B. Leroy knocked. "It's me. Open up." Sounds from inside, furniture moving, locks turning. Then the door opened and his brother was there, alive and whole. And the relief that flooded through Leroy was so intense it made his knees weak. They grabbed each other in a tight hug, neither speaking for a long moment. Leroy could feel his brother shaking, or maybe he was the one shaking, or both of them were. It didn't matter. They were together. "Who's the kid?" his brother asked when they finally pulled apart. "Emma. Found her on Highway 80. Her mom was infected." His brother looked at Emma, his expression softening. "Come inside, both of you." The apartment was small, living room, kitchenette, one bedroom, bathroom. The windows were covered with blankets and duct tape, blocking the light and anyone's view inside. Battery-powered lanterns provided dim illumination. The space smelled like unwashed bodies and fear. Two other people were there, a woman in her 30s, black hair tied back in a ponytail, and an older man with gray stubble and tired eyes. They looked at Leroy and Emma with suspicion mixed with hope. "This is Vanessa and Mr. Howell," his brother said. "They're from the other apartments. We banded together yesterday after the power went out." "Leroy," he said, introducing himself. "And Emma." "You weren't bitten?" Vanessa asked. "Either of you?" "No. Clean. Show me your arms." Leroy set down the rifle and rolled up his sleeves, showed his forearms and hands, scratches from climbing, bruises from jumping between buildings, but no bite marks. Emma did the same, her thin arms unmarked. Vanessa nodded, satisfied. "Okay, welcome to the safe house." His brother led Leroy to the kitchen area, poured water from a large jug into a cup, handed it over. Leroy drank gratefully, the water cool and clean. Emma got her own cup, drained it quickly. "What's the situation?" Leroy asked. "Bad everywhere," his brother said. "Cell towers went down this morning. Internet's been out since last night. We've got a battery radio, but the broadcasts are just emergency warnings on loop. Government says stay inside, help is coming, but no one's come. No police, no National Guard, nothing. I saw a guard on my way here. They were dead. Yeah, we heard gunfire all night, then it stopped around dawn. Whatever fight they put up, they lost." Leroy sat down on the couch, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. 2 days since this started, 2 days of running and fighting and terror. His body was running on adrenaline and stubbornness. "How much food you have?" he asked. "Week's worth if we ration strict. Water for maybe 5 days. After that." His brother shrugged. "We need to get out of the city," Mr. Howell said from across the room. "Find somewhere rural, somewhere with less people. Less people means less of those things." "How?" Vanessa asked. The roads are blocked. Those things are everywhere. We walk, we scavenge, we survive. And go where exactly? You got a farm in the country, some magical safe place? Anywhere is better than here. The argument was old, Leroy could tell. They'd been having this same debate for 2 days, going in circles, unable to agree. Stay put and wait for rescue that might never come, or venture out into a world full of infected and desperate survivors. Emma had curled up on the other end of the couch, her eyes already closing. The exhaustion was catching up with her. Leroy found a blanket, covered her gently. "Let her sleep," he said. "We all need to sleep. Tomorrow we can figure out what to do next." But sleep was hard. Leroy's mind kept replaying the last 2 days. Clyde at the truck window, the cleaver in his hand, the blood everywhere. The mother thing in the van, Emma screaming. The long walk across rooftops and through streets full of death. Every close call, every moment he'd almost died, and they were still alive. Against all odds, they'd survived. But for how long? He dozed fitfully on the floor, the rifle next to him, his hand never far from the grip. Every sound outside made him jerk awake. Footsteps on the stairs, doors slamming, the distant screams that had become the soundtrack of the apocalypse. Dawn came again, gray light filtering around the edges of the window coverings. Leroy woke with his neck stiff and his mouth dry. The others were stirring, everyone moving slowly, conserving energy. His brother made breakfast, crackers and peanut butter, rationed carefully. A quarter sleeve per person, no more. They ate in silence, everyone too tired for conversation. After breakfast, they gathered to discuss plans. The radio played in the background, the same emergency broadcast it had been looping for 2 days. "This is the emergency alert system. Remain in your homes. Avoid contact with infected individuals. Help is on the way. This is the emergency alert system." "Help isn't coming," Vanessa said. "We need to accept that." "We don't know that," his brother argued. "The military could be regrouping, planning a counter-offensive." "With what?" "We heard them get slaughtered. This thing spread too fast, hit too hard. The government's gone, same as everything else." "So what do you propose?" "We leave. Head north, get away from the city. Find a small town, somewhere we can fortify, grow food, wait this out." "And how do we travel? Walk? We've got a kid and an old man. We'd be lucky to make 10 miles a day." "I can keep up," Mr. Howell said defensively. "I didn't mean—" The argument escalated, voices rising. Leroy listened, said nothing. Both sides had valid points. Staying meant slow starvation or eventual discovery by the infected. Leaving meant exposure to all the dangers outside. There was no good answer. Emma was awake now, sitting quietly on the couch, listening to the adults argue. She looked at Leroy with those big, scared eyes, and he saw the question there. "What happens to me?" "Good question, kid." The decision came from an unexpected source. Around noon they heard vehicles outside, multiple engines, heavy trucks from the sound of them. Everyone froze. Leroy grabbed the rifle, moved to the window, carefully pulled back a corner of the blanket covering. A convoy of pickup trucks and SUVs had pulled into the parking lot. At least 20 people, all armed, all moving with military precision. They were going door to door through the apartment building, knocking, calling out, "Survivors! We're collecting people for evacuation to a safe zone. If you're in there, open up." "A rescue?" his brother said, hope lighting his voice. "Maybe," Leroy said, but something felt wrong. The way they moved, the weapons they carried, these weren't soldiers. They were civilians, and they looked rough, desperate. One of them kicked in a door on the ground floor. Leroy heard shouting, then a scream, then gunshots. When the door opened again, the armed men were carrying bags, supplies, food, anything valuable. "They're looting," Vanessa whispered. "It's not a rescue. It's a raid." Footsteps on the stairs, getting closer. They were going through every apartment. "Hide," Leroy said. "Back bedroom, closet, anywhere. Don't make a sound." They moved quickly. His brother Vanessa and Mr. Howell went into the bedroom closet. Emma squeezed into the cabinet under the kitchen sink. Leroy stayed in the living room with the rifle, positioned himself behind the door. The knock came hard and demanding. "Open up! We know you're in there!" Silence. "Last chance before we break it down?" More silence. A shoulder hit the door, hard. The locks held. A second impact, a third. The door frame started to splinter. Leroy aimed the rifle at the door, finger on the trigger. If they came through, if they threatened his brother or Emma, he'd fire. No hesitation. The door burst open on the fourth hit. 3 men came through, rifles raised, looking for targets. The first one saw Leroy, started to swing his weapon. Leroy fired first. The shot caught the man in the chest, dropped him. The second man fired back, the bullet punching through the wall inches from Leroy's head. Leroy rolled, fired again, missed. The third man was shouting into a radio, calling for backup. This was going bad fast. 3 against 1, more coming, no way out. A window shattered in the bedroom. Leroy heard Vanessa scream. They were coming from multiple directions, surrounding them. Leroy fired at the man with the radio, the shot going wide. Return fire forced him to duck behind the couch. The cushions exploded as bullets tore through them, stuffing flying. His brother burst from the bedroom, a kitchen knife in his hand, and tackled the nearest attacker. They went down together, struggling. The knife flashed, found flesh, blood sprayed. Leroy shot the third man, the bullet catching him in the neck. He went down gurgling, hands clutching the wound. But more were coming up the stairs. He could hear them. Too many. They needed to leave, now. "Back window!" Leroy shouted. "Go!" Mr. Howell was already at the bedroom window, the one Vanessa had broken. It led to a small balcony, a drop to the parking lot below. 10 feet, maybe 12. Survivable if they were careful. Vanessa went first, lowering herself as far as she could, then dropping. She hit hard, rolled, came up limping but mobile. Mr. Howell followed, less graceful, landing badly. Leroy heard something crack, a bone probably, but the old man got up, started limping toward the tree line beyond the parking lot. Emma was still under the sink. Leroy ran to the kitchen, pulled her out. "We have to jump. I'll help you." They ran to the bedroom. His brother was still fighting with the attacker, the two of them rolling on the floor, the knife between them. Leroy couldn't get a shot without risking hitting his brother. More footsteps in the hallway, voices shouting. They were out of time. Leroy got Emma to the window. "Hold onto my neck." "Tight as you can." She wrapped her small arms around his neck, her legs around his waist. Leroy climbed through the window onto the balcony, felt her weight nearly unbalance him. He gripped the railing with one hand, the rifle in the other, and dropped. The landing was brutal. His knees buckled, pain shooting up his legs, but he stayed upright. Emma let go, dropped to the ground beside him. They ran. His brother appeared at the window above, blood on his shirt. His own, or the attacker's. Leroy couldn't tell. "Go! I'm right behind you." But he wasn't. An arm appeared through the window, grabbed his brother's shoulder, pulled him back inside. His brother fought, his face desperate, reaching toward Leroy. Then he was gone, yanked back into the apartment. "No!" Leroy stopped, started to turn back. Gunfire from the window. Bullets hit the pavement around him. One of them grazed his arm, a line of fire across his bicep. He stumbled, fell, got back up. "Run!" Vanessa grabbed Emma's hand, was already moving toward the trees. Mr. Howell was ahead of them, limping fast despite his injury. Leroy looked back at the apartment building. His brother was still up there, still fighting, but going back meant dying, meant accomplishing nothing except getting Emma killed. He ran. They made it to the tree line, pushed through underbrush and low branches. Behind them, more gunfire, shouting, the sounds of the raid continuing. They ran until the apartment complex was out of sight, until the trees became thick enough to hide them, until Leroy's lungs burned and his legs refused to carry him further. Then they stopped, collapsed against trees and rocks, gasping. Emma was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Vanessa was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, probably from the broken window. Mr. Howell's leg was swelling, the ankle clearly broken or at least badly sprained. And Leroy's brother was back there. Captured or dead, Leroy didn't know. But gone either way. The wound on his arm was bleeding, not heavily but steady. He tore a strip from his shirt, tied it around the wound, pulled it tight. The pain was distant, unimportant compared to the hollowness in his chest. "We can't stay here," Vanessa said. "They might follow." "Where do we go?" Leroy asked. His voice sounded dead even to his own ears. "North, away from the city. Find somewhere isolated. Mr. Howell can't walk with that leg. Then we make a crutch. We improvise. We survive. Survive." The word was starting to lose meaning. Survival for what? Everyone he cared about was gone. His grandmother years ago, his parents before that, now his brother. The food truck destroyed, his life erased in 2 days. But Emma was looking at him with those scared eyes, and Vanessa was bleeding, and Mr. Howell was trying not to show how much pain he was in. They were alive, and they were depending on him. "Okay," Leroy said. North. They fashioned a crutch for Mr. Howell using a fallen branch and some duct tape from Leroy's bag. The duct tape he'd grabbed from the food truck in what felt like another lifetime. The old man tested it, winced, but managed to walk with support. They moved through the woods slowly, following what looked like an old trail, maybe a deer path. The trees provided cover but also limited their visibility. Any of those things could be hiding here, drawn by the smell of blood or the sounds they were making. The sun was past its peak when they found the house. Set back in a clearing, a small ranch-style home with a detached garage, surrounded by a wooden fence. It looked abandoned. No vehicles, no lights, curtains drawn. But it was shelter. And shelter meant they could rest, could tend their wounds, could plan their next move. Leroy approached carefully, the rifle ready. The front door was locked. He circled to the back, found a sliding glass door that opened with a hard pull. Not locked, just stuck in its frame. Inside, the house was dim and quiet. The furniture was covered with sheets, dust thick on every surface. It had been abandoned before the outbreak, maybe for months. Leroy cleared each room carefully, living room, kitchen, 2 bedrooms, bathroom, making sure they were alone. "It's clear," he called to the others. They came in gratefully, Vanessa helping Mr. Howell to the couch. The old man sat down with a groan, elevated his leg. Emma stood near the door, looking lost. "Emma, check the kitchen," Leroy said, giving her something to do. "See if there's any food left. Canned goods, anything sealed." She nodded, moved with purpose. Having a task helped, gave her focus beyond the fear. The bathroom had running water, weak pressure, but water nonetheless. The well pump must have been working on a backup system. Leroy filled the tub, let everyone drink their fill, used the rest to clean wounds. His arm needed stitches, but he had no way to do that. He made do with bandages and antiseptic from a first aid kit he found under the sink. Vanessa's head wound was superficial, looked worse than it was. Mr. Howell's ankle was definitely broken, the joint already purple and swollen to twice its normal size. Without proper medical care, it would heal wrong, leave him with a permanent limp, but they'd deal with that later. Right now, they were alive. Emma found a few cans in the kitchen, green beans, peaches, tomato soup. Not much, but combined with what they'd brought from the apartment, enough for a few days if they were careful. They ate cold soup straight from the can, passed the peaches around, made it feel almost like a meal. As darkness fell, they secured the house, locked the doors, covered the windows with sheets, made sure no light showed from outside. Leroy set up a watch rotation, 2 hours each, someone always awake in case the raiders found them or those things came shambling out of the woods. He took first watch, sitting by the front window with the rifle across his lap, looking out at the dark clearing. The night was full of sounds, insects, wind in the trees, distant screams. Always the screams. He wondered how many people were still alive in Jackson, how many were hiding in houses or apartments, how many had been caught by the infected or the raiders. His brother's face kept appearing in his mind. That last moment at the window, reaching out, being pulled back. Leroy should have done something, should have gone back, should have died trying to save him. Instead, he'd run, saved himself and Emma and these strangers while his brother was taken. The guilt was a physical weight, pressing down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. Vanessa took over the watch at 2 in the morning. Leroy tried to sleep on the floor, using a rolled-up sheet as a pillow, but nightmares kept jerking him awake. In his dreams, Clyde came through the service window over and over, his hands reaching, and when Leroy swung the cleaver, it was his brother's face looking back at him. Morning came as a relief. They ate canned green beans for breakfast, drank water from the tap. Mr. Howell's ankle looked even worse, the swelling spreading up his calf. They needed antibiotics, needed proper medical supplies, but hospitals were probably overrun with infected. Their best bet was a pharmacy or a veterinary clinic, somewhere small enough to scavenge safely. "I'll go," Leroy said. "You 3 stay here, rest. I'll look for supplies." "You shouldn't go alone," Vanessa said. "Someone needs to stay with Emma and Mr. Howell. That's you. At least take this." She handed him a handgun, small caliber, maybe a .38. "Found it in the bedroom closet, 6 shots." He took it gratefully, checked the load. All 6 chambers filled. Not much, but better than nothing. With the rifle and the handgun, he felt almost prepared. "I'll be back by dark," he promised. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone unless I knock 3 times, pause, 2 more times. Got it?" Vanessa nodded. Emma looked scared but didn't protest. Leroy went out through the back door into the woods, retracing their path from yesterday. The apartment complex was a mile south, visible through the trees when he got close enough. He gave it wide berth, not wanting to risk running into the raiders again. He found a road, followed it east, keeping to the tree line where he could hide if vehicles approached. A few miles down, he found a small strip mall, a dollar store, a pizza place, a veterinary clinic. The clinic looked intact, the windows unbroken, the door closed. Leroy approached carefully, checked the parking lot for threats, saw nothing. He tried the door, locked. He smashed the window with the rifle butt, reached through to unlock it from inside, wincing at the noise. If anything nearby heard that, they'd come investigating. He slipped inside quickly. The clinic was dark, smelled like antiseptic and dog food. The reception area was empty, but the exam rooms in back held what he needed. He found a cabinet full of medical supplies, antibiotics, painkillers, bandages, syringes. He filled a bag with everything useful, including a set of instructions on how to splint a broken bone properly. A sound from the back room. Movement, something heavy dragging across the floor. Leroy froze, the rifle coming up. One of those things was in here with him. The door to the back room opened slowly. A dog emerged, massive and black, some kind of mastiff breed. It was thin, ribs showing through its coat, but very much alive and very much interested in Leroy. The dog growled, a sound that echoed in the small space. "Easy," Leroy said softly. "Easy, boy." The dog's tail was between its legs, its head low, scared, not aggressive. It had probably been locked in here since the outbreak, living on whatever food and water it could find. Leroy reached slowly into his bag, pulled out a granola bar, unwrapped it, broke off a piece. He tossed it to the dog. The animal sniffed it, then ate it in one bite. Its tail lifted slightly. "Good dog," Leroy said. He tossed another piece. The dog ate it, its whole body starting to wag now. He gave it the rest of the granola bar, let the dog approach on its own terms. It sniffed his hand, licked his fingers, then pressed against his leg, seeking contact. Poor thing had been alone for days, terrified and starving. "You want to come with me?" Leroy asked. "I've got a little girl who might like you." The dog's tail wagged harder. Leroy found a leash in the reception area, clipped it to the dog's collar. The tag said Bear, along with a phone number that was probably useless now. Bear. Good name for a dog this size. They left the clinic together. Bear stayed close to Leroy's side, well trained despite his ordeal. The dog would be useful. Protection, early warning, companionship for Emma. Worth the extra food he'd require. The walk back took longer with Bear, the dog stopping frequently to sniff and mark territory. Leroy let him, kept watch for threats, moved slowly and carefully. They reached the house around 4 in the afternoon, the sun still high but starting to angle toward evening. Leroy knocked 3 times, paused 2 more. The door opened immediately. Vanessa stood there with the .38 in her hand, then lowered it when she saw it was him. "You brought a dog?" "Found him at a vet clinic. Figured we could use him." Emma appeared behind Vanessa, her eyes going wide. "A dog? His name's Bear. He's friendly." Emma dropped to her knees, threw her arms around the big dog's neck. Bear's tail went into overdrive, his whole rear end wiggling. For the first time since Leroy had met her, Emma smiled. Inside, Leroy showed Vanessa the medical supplies. She sorted through them, nodded approval. "This is good. Real good. We can treat Mr. Howell's ankle properly, keep infection at bay." They spent the next hour working on Mr. Howell's leg, splinting it with wooden boards from the garage, wrapping it tight, giving him painkillers and antibiotics. The old man gritted his teeth through the process, but when they were done, he looked more comfortable. That night they had the first real discussion about long-term plans. The house was shelter, but it was temporary. Eventually the food would run out, or they'd be discovered, or winter would come and they'd freeze. They needed a permanent solution. "Head north to the rural areas," Mr. Howell said. "Find a farm somewhere with land we can work, grow food, raise animals, build a real community." "That's months of travel," Vanessa said, "and we don't know what's out there. Could be worse than here. Couldn't be worse than Jackson." "We should look for other survivors," Leroy suggested. "People we can trust. There's safety in numbers. There's also danger. Those raiders proved that." "Not all survivors are raiders. There must be good people out there trying to rebuild." They talked in circles for an hour, reaching no consensus. In the end, they agreed to stay at the house for a week, rest and recover, scout the area for resources and information. After that, they'd decide together which direction to go. The week passed slowly. They fell into a routine, watch rotations, scavenging trips, cooking over a fire in the backyard when they dared, otherwise eating food cold. Bear proved his worth, alerting them twice to approaching infected. Both times they'd hidden inside until the things wandered past. The dog had a gift for sensing them, some instinct Leroy was grateful for. Emma was slowly coming out of her shell. The trauma was still there. Leroy heard her crying at night, saw the way she startled at sudden sounds, but she was adapting, learning to survive. She'd attached herself to Bear, sleeping next to him, feeding him, talking to him in quiet whispers. The dog gave her something to care about beyond fear. Mr. Howell's ankle was healing, but slowly. He could put weight on it now with the splint, could move short distances with the crutch, but he wouldn't be running anywhere. If they had to move fast, he'd be a liability. Vanessa was the practical one, always thinking 3 steps ahead, always planning. She'd found tools in the garage, weapons they could use, a hammer, a crowbar, a machete for clearing brush that worked equally well on infected skulls. She reinforced the doors and windows, created escape routes, turned the house into something more defensible. And Leroy was trying not to think about his brother, trying to focus on the present, on keeping these people alive, on the responsibility he'd somehow acquired. But at night, when it was quiet, the guilt came back. His brother had made it to the window, had been right there, and Leroy had run, saved himself, left family behind. He didn't know if he could forgive himself for that. On the 8th day, they heard engines. Not the distant rumble they'd grown used to, but close, getting closer. Multiple vehicles heading their way. Everyone grabbed weapons, took positions. Bear growled low in his throat. Through a gap in the curtains, Leroy saw the convoy. 4 vehicles, including one he recognized from the apartment raid. They were searching houses, looking for survivors or supplies. "We need to leave," Vanessa whispered. "Now. Mr. Howell can't move fast enough. Then we carry him." They went out the back door as the raiders reached the front. Leroy carried Mr. Howell piggyback, the old man's weight sending pain shooting through his legs. Vanessa had Emma by the hand, Bear on a leash, all of them moving as fast as they could toward the tree line. Behind them, glass shattered, voices shouting they'd been found. Leroy didn't look back, just kept moving, deeper into the woods. A gunshot cracked through the air, the bullet hitting a tree to his left. They were being chased. "Split up," Vanessa said. "Meet at the stream, the one we found yesterday." "No, it's the only way. They can't chase all of us." She took off left with Emma and Bear, disappearing into the underbrush. Leroy went right, Mr. Howell bouncing on his back, the old man clinging tight. More gunshots behind them, voices getting closer. His legs were burning, his back screaming, but he kept running. A ravine appeared ahead, steep-sided and deep. Leroy didn't stop, just slid down the slope, Mr. Howell barely hanging on. They hit the bottom hard, rolled, came up muddy and bruised, but alive. Leroy lay there gasping, listening to the sounds of pursuit above them. The voices passed by, searching in the wrong direction. After 5 minutes, they faded completely. Leroy stayed still for another 10 minutes, making sure they were really gone. "That was close," Mr. Howell whispered. "Too close." They climbed out of the ravine carefully, Mr. Howell using his good leg and Leroy's shoulder for support. The stream Vanessa had mentioned was a 1/4 mile east. They found it, followed it downstream, and there, sitting on a fallen log next to the water, were Vanessa, Emma, and Bear. The relief was overwhelming. They were together again. They'd survived, but they'd lost the house, lost their shelter, lost what little stability they'd managed to find. Now they were back to moving, back to running, back to surviving moment by moment with no long-term plan. "What now?" Emma asked. Good question. Leroy looked at the 3 of them, a scared child, an injured old man, a woman trying to hold it together through sheer willpower. His responsibility now, his people. "We keep going," he said. "Find somewhere safer. Somewhere those raiders won't find us." Where? He didn't have an answer. North, maybe, or east, deeper into the rural areas. Anywhere away from Jackson, away from the cities where the infection was worst. They walked through the afternoon, following the stream because it provided water and direction. Bear ranged ahead, sniffing and exploring, his tail up and alert. Emma held Vanessa's hand, walking without complaint despite her obvious exhaustion. As evening approached, they found another house. This one was truly abandoned. No furniture inside, no personal items, just an empty shell. But it had a roof and 4 walls, and that was enough. They settled in for the night. No fire, no light that could be seen from outside. Cold canned food for dinner, water from the stream. They took turns on watch, sleeping in shifts. Leroy's shift was midnight to 2. He sat by the empty window frame, looking out at the dark forest, listening to the sounds of the night. Somewhere out there, his brother might still be alive. Might be a prisoner of the raiders, or might have escaped, or might be... No. He couldn't think about that. His phone was long dead, the battery drained days ago. But he kept it in his pocket anyway, a connection to the before time, to the person he used to be when the biggest worry was replacing the alternator belt on his food truck. That life was gone. The food truck was gone. Jackson was gone, consumed by infection and fire and violence. Everything he'd built over 42 years had been erased in less than a week. But he was alive. Emma was alive. They'd survived. The question was, for how much longer? Morning brought rain, a steady drizzle that soaked through their clothes and made everything miserable. They stayed in the abandoned house, huddled together for warmth, eating sparingly from their dwindling supplies. The medical bag was still half full, but the food was running low. Maybe 2 days left, 3 if they really rationed. "We need to find a town," Vanessa said. "Somewhere we can scavenge properly, stock up on supplies." "Towns mean people," Mr. Howell said. "People mean trouble. People also mean resources, stores, houses, supplies. We can't survive on what we're carrying." She was right. Leroy knew it, they all knew it. But the thought of going into another populated area, even a small one, made his stomach clench with dread. "There's a town called Brandon about 10 miles east," Vanessa said. "Bigger than Pearl, but not huge. Might be worth checking." "Or it might be overrun with infected," Mr. Howell countered. "Only one way to find out." They debated for another hour, but there was really no choice. Stay here and starve, or move and take their chances. They packed up what little they had, made sure Mr. Howell's splint was secure, and set out. The rain made travel difficult. The ground was slick, the visibility poor. Bear walked with his head down, looking as miserable as the rest of them. Emma didn't complain, but Leroy could see her shivering, her thin dress soaked through. He gave her his jacket, which was also soaked but at least provided some windbreak. They reached the outskirts of Brandon by late afternoon. The town was small, maybe 10,000 people normally, spread along a main highway with residential streets branching off. From their position on a wooded hill overlooking the town, they could see the damage. Buildings burned, cars abandoned, bodies in the streets, but also signs of life, smoke from chimneys, lights in windows as the evening came on, movement between buildings. Survivors, a lot of them. "We should approach carefully," Leroy said. "Try to make contact, see if they're friendly. Or we could just observe for a while," Mr. Howell suggested. "See how they interact with each other, whether they're organized or just scattered groups fighting over supplies." They compromised, watching from the hill as darkness fell. The town had activity, but it was chaotic. Groups moving through streets with weapons, confrontations and fights, occasional gunshots. This wasn't an organized survival community. This was barely controlled anarchy. "Bad idea," Vanessa said. "We should find another town." But before they could leave, voices behind them. 3 men emerging from the woods, armed with hunting rifles, looking rough and unfriendly. "Well, well," one of them said. "What do we have here?" Leroy's hand went to his rifle, but the 3 men already had their weapons raised. Standing down was the only option. "We're just passing through," Leroy said. "Don't want any trouble. That right? You got supplies? Food? Medicine? Nothing to spare." The leader, a heavy-set man with a beard, stepped closer. His eyes went to the medical bag, then to Emma, then to Vanessa. "I think you're lying. I think you got plenty we could use." This was going to turn violent. Leroy could see it in their faces, in their posture. These weren't people looking to help or trade. These were predators. Bear growled, low and threatening. The big dog moved to stand between Emma and the strangers, his hackles raised. "Call off your dog," the bearded man said. "He's protective. Best to just back off and let us leave." "I don't think so." The man raised his rifle, aiming at Bear. Leroy moved without thinking, bringing his own rifle up, aiming at the man's chest. "Don't," Leroy said. The standoff lasted 5 seconds. Then everything happened at once. The bearded man fired. Bear yelped, went down. Emma screamed. Leroy fired back, his shot catching the man in the shoulder, spinning him around. The other two opened fire. Vanessa was shooting back with the .38. Mr. Howell was trying to get Emma to cover. Leroy felt something punch his side, hot and sharp. He'd been shot. He fired again, then again, saw one of the attackers go down. The third man was running, disappearing into the woods. The bearded man was on the ground, wounded but alive. Leroy stood over him, the rifle pointed at his head. "Please," the man said. "Don't." Leroy pulled the trigger. The sound echoed through the trees. Then everything was quiet except for Emma's crying. She was kneeling next to Bear, her hands on his fur. The dog was breathing but not moving, blood spreading across his side. "We need to move," Vanessa said. "That gunfire will attract infected, and that third guy might bring friends." "Bear's hurt," Emma sobbed. Leroy went to the dog, checked the wound. The bullet had grazed his ribs, left a bloody furrow but hadn't penetrated deep. Painful and serious, but not immediately fatal. "We can treat him," Leroy said, "but we need to get somewhere safe first." His own wound was bleeding through his shirt. He pressed his hand against it, felt the hot wetness. The bullet had gone through cleanly, in and out, missing anything vital. Lucky. But he was losing blood, starting to feel lightheaded. "Can you walk?" Vanessa asked him. "Have to." They left the dead men where they lay, moved away from the town, deeper into the woods. Mr. Howell was limping badly, his ankle swollen again from the stress. Emma was half carrying Bear's head, whispering to him, begging him to be okay. Vanessa was supporting Leroy, her arm around his waist, taking some of his weight. They made it maybe a mile before Leroy couldn't go further. The blood loss was catching up to him, his vision graying at the edges. He sat down heavily against a tree. "Keep going," he told Vanessa. "I'll catch up." "Bullshit. We stay together. I'm slowing you down." "Then we're all slow. Deal with it." She got the medical bag, pulled out supplies. The wound needed cleaning and bandaging, maybe stitches, though she didn't know how to do them. She did her best, packing the wound with gauze, wrapping it tight with bandages, giving him antibiotics from the bag. "You're an idiot for getting shot," she said while she worked. "Wasn't my first choice." "Well, don't do it again." Despite the pain and the fear and the exhaustion, Leroy smiled. Gallows humor, but it helped. Bear was next. The dog lay still while Vanessa cleaned and bandaged his wound. Gave him antibiotics meant for humans, but that would probably work. He whimpered a few times but didn't snap or bite. Good dog. Brave dog. They camped there for the night, too tired to move further. No fire, no shelter, just huddled together under the trees while the rain continued. Emma curled up next to Bear, her small body pressed against his fur. The dog's tail gave a weak thump. Leroy's wound throbbed with every heartbeat. He'd killed a man today. Not one of those things, but an actual living person. Shot him while he was down, executed him. The fact that the man would have done the same to him didn't make it easier. Taking a human life left a stain, something that wouldn't wash away. But he'd do it again if he had to protect Emma, to protect these people. He'd become someone he didn't recognize, someone capable of violence without hesitation. The apocalypse had stripped away the civilized veneer, revealed the survivor underneath. He didn't like what he'd found. The next 3 days blurred together. They moved slowly, resting frequently, living on the last of their supplies. The wound in Leroy's side was healing, but it hurt constantly, made every movement difficult. Bear was recovering too, able to walk on his own now, though he limped. Mr. Howell's ankle was a constant problem, the old man grimacing with every step. They avoided towns, avoided roads, stayed in the woods and moved from house to house, scavenging what they could find. Most places had already been picked clean, but occasionally they'd find something useful, a can of soup, a bottle of water, a box of crackers. It wasn't enough. They were starving slowly, their bodies consuming themselves to keep going. Emma's face had hollowed out, her eyes too large in her small skull. Mr. Howell was feverish, his ankle likely infected despite the antibiotics. Vanessa was holding together through sheer stubbornness, but even she was showing the strain. And Leroy was dying. Not from the gunshot wound that was healing, but from infection. The antibiotics weren't strong enough, or he'd waited too long to treat it. Either way, fever was setting in, his wound hot and inflamed. He knew what that meant. Days, maybe a week before the infection killed him. No hospitals, no doctors, no way to get the help he needed. He was going to die in these woods, far from home, surrounded by people he barely knew. At least it wasn't from being bitten. He wouldn't become one of those things. On what he thought was day 14 since the outbreak started, though he'd lost count, and it might have been 15 or 13, they found a church. Small country church, white paint peeling, cross on the roof. The doors were unlocked. Inside, pews and a pulpit and a small room in back that must have been the minister's office. "This'll work," Vanessa said. "We can rest here a few days, recover." "I'm not recovering," Leroy said. The words came out flat, matter of fact. "The infection's too advanced. I've got maybe 3 days left." Emma started crying. Mr. Howell looked away. Vanessa just nodded, her face carefully blank. "Then we make you comfortable," she said. "That's what we do." They set up camp in the church, made a bed for Leroy from pew cushions, covered him with their one blanket. Emma brought Bear over and the dog lay down next to him, warm and solid. The big animal's breathing was steady, reassuring. That night, Leroy's fever spiked. He drifted in and out of consciousness, his dreams and reality blurring. He was back at the food truck, serving customers who had Clyde's empty eyes. His brother was at the window, reaching for him, always reaching but never quite close enough to touch. His grandmother was there too, young like she'd been in photographs from before he was born, telling him to come home, that dinner was ready. When he woke, it was dark. Someone was on watch, Vanessa sitting by the door with the rifle. Emma was asleep next to him, her hand resting on Bear's fur. Mr. Howell was snoring softly from his pew. "Vanessa," Leroy whispered. She came over, knelt beside him. "You need something? Water? Promise me you'll take care of Emma. Get her somewhere safe." "Of course." "And Mr. Howell, don't leave him behind." "I won't." "And Bear. He's a good dog. Leroy, I need to know they'll be okay, that this meant something." "It meant something. You saved Emma. You helped us survive. That's not nothing." But it felt like nothing. His food truck was gone. His brother was probably dead. His life had been erased, leaving barely a trace. In a few days, he'd be gone too. And maybe Vanessa and the others would survive, or maybe they wouldn't. Either way, the world would keep turning, indifferent to his existence or absence. "I'm scared," he admitted. "I don't want to die." "I know. Tell Emma, tell her I was glad I found her, that she reminded me why it's worth fighting. Tell her yourself." "You're not dead yet." But he was close. He could feel it, the infection spreading through his body, his organs shutting down one by one. The fever was so high now he couldn't think straight, couldn't tell what was real and what was delirium. Time became fluid. Sometimes it was day, sometimes night. Sometimes Emma was there, sometimes Vanessa, sometimes he was alone except for Bear. The dog never left, stayed loyally by his side, warm and alive. His phone was in his pocket. He pulled it out with shaking hands, looked at the dead screen. All those texts from his brother, the last conversation they'd had. "Love you, man. Get here safe." "I tried," Leroy whispered to the phone, to his brother's ghost. "I really tried." On the morning of what Vanessa later told him was day 16, Leroy woke up with a strange clarity. The fever was still there, but his mind was sharp. The fog lifted. He knew what this meant, the brief lucidity before the end, the body's last rally. "I need to go outside," he told Vanessa. She helped him up, supported his weight as he shuffled to the church door. The morning was beautiful. Clear sky, birds singing, the world apparently unconcerned with its own ending. They sat on the church steps together, Leroy breathing hard from the minimal exertion. "I wanted to get to Jackson," he said, "to the capital. I don't even know why. Maybe just to see it one more time, to know I made it back home. The capital's not home. Home is people. My people are dead. We're here. Emma, Mr. Howell, me, Bear. We're your people now." He looked at her, this woman he'd known for less than 3 weeks, who'd become something like family in that time. The apocalypse had destroyed the old definitions, created new ones. Family wasn't blood anymore. It was who you survived with, who you trusted, who you'd die to protect. "Take care of them," he said again. "I will. I promise." Bear came out of the church, limped over to Leroy, pushed his big head into Leroy's lap. The dog's eyes were brown and kind and worried. Leroy scratched behind his ears, felt the soft fur, the solid warmth of living creature. "Good dog," he whispered. "Such a good dog." Emma appeared in the doorway, her thin face worried. "Leroy? Come here, sweetheart." She sat next to him on the steps. He put his arm around her narrow shoulders, pulled her close. "I need you to be brave," he told her. "Can you do that for me?" "I'm trying." "I know. You're the bravest kid I ever met. Your mom would be proud." "I miss her." "I know, but you've got Vanessa now, and Mr. Howell, and Bear. They'll take care of you." "What about you?" "I'm going to sleep soon. A long sleep. But I need you to keep going, okay? Keep being brave. Keep surviving." She started crying, buried her face in his shoulder. He held her while she sobbed, his own tears coming too, running down his face into his beard. This little girl he'd known for 2 weeks, who'd lost everything, who deserved so much better than this broken world. "I love you," he told her, because someone needed to say it, because she needed to hear it. "I love you too," she whispered back. They sat there for a long time, watching the morning light filter through the trees, listening to the birds, pretending for a moment that the world was still normal, still safe, still full of possibility. But it wasn't, and they all knew it. That afternoon, Leroy's condition worsened again. The fever came roaring back, the brief clarity fading. He lay on the pew cushions, drifting in and out of consciousness, his breathing labored and wet. Vanessa tried to make him comfortable, wiped his forehead with a damp cloth, gave him water when he could drink. There was nothing else to do. No miracle cure, no last-minute rescue, just waiting. Night fell. Leroy knew this would be his last one. His body was failing, shutting down, and there was a strange peace in knowing it was almost over. The struggle, the fear, the constant danger, soon it would all stop. Around midnight, he woke up to find Emma asleep next to him, her small hand holding his. Bear was on the other side, the dog's head on his chest. Vanessa and Mr. Howell were sleeping in nearby pews. His family, his strange apocalypse family. He wished he could have done more for them, found them a real shelter, a safe community, a future. But he'd done what he could, and maybe that would be enough. Maybe they'd survive, find somewhere safe, rebuild something like a life. Or maybe they'd die too in days or weeks, and it would all be for nothing. Either way, his part was finished. Leroy closed his eyes, let his breathing slow, felt himself slipping away. The last thing he felt was Emma's hand holding his, and Bear's warmth against his side, and Vanessa's voice saying something he couldn't quite hear. Then nothing. Dawn came to the church, light streaming through the windows. Vanessa woke first, checked on Leroy, and knew immediately he was gone. His chest was still, his hand cold. Peaceful at least. He'd died in his sleep, without pain. Emma woke up crying, already knowing. Bear whimpered, nuzzled the body, trying to understand why his person wouldn't wake up. They buried him behind the church, in the small cemetery there, using tools from the shed to dig a grave. It took hours with only Vanessa able to work, but she refused to leave him above ground, refused to let him become one of those things. He deserved better. They said words over the grave. Emma cried. Mr. Howell recited a prayer. Vanessa just stood there, silent, one more person added to the list of those she'd lost. Then they packed up their supplies, what little remained, and left the church. North, Vanessa decided. They'd keep going north, away from the cities, away from the infected, away from the raiders. Find somewhere rural, somewhere isolated, somewhere they could survive. Emma walked with Bear's leash in one hand, the dog staying close to her side. Mr. Howell limped along with his crutch. Vanessa carried the rifle and the bag of medical supplies. They were 3 people and a dog against the end of the world, but they were still alive, still fighting, still surviving. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all anyone could ask for.